Chapter 1259. In the vast thousand domains, whether it was the human clan or the demon clan, they were all amazed by the strength of Xianmen Tianzong. Meanwhile, on Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng heard a system notification. Congratulations to the host for completing the main mission 2. 3. The special reward for the main mission has been released. Lin Feng smiled and did not say much. As usual, after the previous main mission was completed, the system would issue a new main mission. The previous main mission 2 was to have a total of more than 1,000 disciples within 50 years. Among them, cultivators in the Yuanying period must account for 1%. Cultivators in the Golden Elixir period must account for at least 10%, and cultivators in the Foundation Establishment period must account for at least 39%. When he was in Lingyuan Mountain, Lin Feng submitted the mission. Because he had far exceeded the quota, he received 2 special rewards for the main mission at one time. One was the Heaven-Severing Sealed Realm, and the other was the Primordial Golden Lamp. At that time, a new main mission was also issued. However, Lin Feng did not pay attention to it at that time. Instead, he focused on dealing with the war between the 2 realms. Main Mission 2. 3. Dominate the peak and suppress the current generation mission description. Congratulations to the host for establishing a high reputation in the Great Tianyuan world, cultivating a large number of outstanding disciples, and stabilizing the fate of a holy land. The foundation of the sect has been solid, the branches are flourishing, and the vitality is flourishing. It is time to stride towards the peak, to become the number 1 sect throughout the ages. The first step is to become the publicly recognized number 1 sect and holy land in the Great Tianyuan world. Complete the magnificent feat of suppressing the current generation and leading the group. Mission time limit, 300 years. If the mission is not completed within the time limit, the special reward for the main mission will be cancelled. This was the latest main mission that Lin Feng had received at that time. Now, the notification sound in his ears indicated that he had completed this mission just now. Compared to the time limit of 300 years, the time Lin Feng used this time was so short that it was almost negligible. It wasn't that the mission was too simple. From the content of the mission, ever since the Taishu Temple ascended to the throne of the number 1 Holy Land sect in the Divine Land in ancient times, until today, countless years had passed, through the Ancient Era, the Middle Era, and the current Ancient Era. No one had been able to replace its position. At the intersection of the Ancient Era and the Middle Era, when the Elysium was at its peak, it once showed a momentum and strength that overshadowed the Taishu Temple at that time. However, as the Elysium quickly declined from its peak, this point could not be verified in time. Hence, it became a big doubt in the Divine Land forever. Because of this, the Taishu Temple had been sitting on the throne of the number 1 Holy Land in China, until today. After the Battle of Mount Shu, and before the war between the 2 realms, Lin Feng commanded Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple as an equal. They were known as the 2 poles of China. However, even Lin Feng himself did not think that it was better than Taishu Temple. No matter how he felt about that place, its strength was strong and its foundation was deep. Lin Feng had always tried to overestimate it. However, as the war between the 2 realms progressed, everything changed. Not only was the Heaven Punishment Sword successfully sealed once again, allowing the strength of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong to directly overwhelm the Haotian Mirror's Taishu Temple, which had yet to fully recover. After the war between the 2 realms, the reputation and prestige of Xianmen Tianzong had once again increased by leaps and bounds. It became the undisputed number 1 in the Divine Land. During the course of the war, the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong rose strongly and played a key role in one local battlefield after another. What was even more eye-catching was that in the war between the 2 realms, almost all the top-notch great demons of the demon race that had fallen were killed by the strong practitioners of Xianmen Tianzong. The great sage Zhu Jian, a great demon at the first tribulation stage, was killed by Lin Feng's 3rd disciple, Wang Lin, in the Yingxi. The strong practitioner of the dragon race at the Union of Stars and Souls as one, Flame Dragon King Lu Yan, was killed by Lin Feng's 2nd disciple, Zhu Yi, in the Infinite Wasteland. The Blue Sky Dragon King, who was only 1 step away from the Last Day's realm, after enduring Sword Venerable Celestial Dipper's Last Day's tribulation, and falling into a weakened state, He bore the pressure of the Kuan Dragon King for Lin Feng's second disciple Zhu Yi, breaking through the mysterious sea summoning ritual, and killing him on the infinite wasteland. The great demon at the last day's realm of Yudu clan, Empty Yudu, was personally killed by Lin Feng in the outer realm. The great sage of the Golden Rock at the first tribulation stage, although he had fallen in the hands of the enchantress, the crucial point was that the Yudu skeleton he used to intimidate others was destroyed by Lin Feng in the Divine Land. That was why the enchantress could attack him without fear. Other than that, the most mysterious great demon at the last days, the enchantress, was forced to self-destruct. Although he didn't die, he had no choice but to withdraw from the war between the two realms. At the same time that he crippled the enchantress, Lin Feng also trapped the two strong practitioners of the ancient devil ape race, the Great Sage and Zhu Yan Great Sage, in Spirit Abyss Mountain. They couldn't interfere in the war between the two realms. Yudu clans Zhanming Yudu, Ningfeng Yudu, and Wanlong Yudu were severely injured by White Tiger Great Sage, who was under the command of Lin Feng's seventh disciple, Shi Tianhao, and Xianmen Tianzong. If it wasn't for Green Crest Yudu, Jingyan Yudu, and the other strong practitioners of Yudu, they wouldn't have escaped their fate of being captured and killed. When the war between the two realms came to an end, everyone looked back. Xianmen Tianzong's glorious achievements shook the entire heaven primordial world. In fairness, other than Xianmen Tianzong, the role that Taishu Temple played in the war between the two realms couldn't be ignored. Even if they didn't achieve any results and even lost Dao Venerable Qing Yi and Yen Nanlai, two big shots, the role that Taishu Temple played in the war between the two realms couldn't be erased. From the moment the war broke out, Taishu Temple had always been under the most direct pressure. They went deep into the dragon race's ancestral land, the mysterious sea, to fight the strong practitioners of the dragon race. After the Yudu clan returned to the boundless world, White Cloud Mountain was also their main target. Taishu Temple resisted the pressure and Xianmen Tianzong swept through. This was the true portrayal of the early stage of the war between the two realms. The Divine Land even had the upper hand at that time. However, as the Yudu clan returned to the boundless world, the king of the underworld suddenly appeared and shook the Haotian mirror out of everyone's expectations. This changed the situation, and the Divine Land no longer had the upper hand. During this time, the strong practitioners of the dragon race came out of the mysterious sea. Mount Shushan erupted in internal strife, and the enchantress and the primordial devil ape race became restless. Yudu first broke through Taihua before descending upon the white clouds. In the war between the two realms, the advantage of the human cultivation world immediately became a disadvantage. Thus, in the middle of the war between the two realms, the main melody of the Divine Land became Taishu Temple continuing to resist the pressure, and Xianmen Tianzong putting out fires everywhere. As the Yudu clan grew stronger, and the king of the underworld was getting closer and closer to seizing the Haotian mirror, the Taishu Temple that was resisting the pressure finally collapsed step by step. To the cultivators of the human race, the war between the two realms was also sliding towards the abyss of failure. However, it was also at this time that the entire Xianmen Tianzong attacked and truly turned the tide. Even though Emperor Qin's stone feather had fallen and Immortal Dragon City had disappeared, the second disciple under Lin Feng, Zhu Yi, still worked together with Big Dipper Sword Venerable of Mount Shushan to resist the pressure from Kuan Dragon King and kill Jade Sky Dragon King. They also defended the southern borders firmly, stopping the strong practitioners of the dragon race from the mysterious sea from advancing any further. Meanwhile, the eldest disciple under Lin Feng, Xiao Yan, forcefully quelled the internal strife of Mount Shushan. The seventh disciple, Shi Tianhao, guarded the isolated and helpless West Hill city that was about to be destroyed, stopping the great demons of Yudu that were chasing after Taishu Temple Monastery Master Yen Nanlai. Lin Feng himself, at the most critical moment, used his 4 swords to rule the world and slash through the mysterious sea, resolving the hopes of the dragon race and the king of the underworld to seize the Haotian mirror. He almost wiped out the entire bloodline of the king of the underworld, intimidating the strong practitioners of the mysterious sea so that they didn't dare to act recklessly. He even repelled the strongest race of Heaven Wasteland, the Yudu race. In the final battle, Lin Feng almost used his own power to forcefully turn the tide of the battle. shattering the tide that was about to drown the divine land. After the heaven punishment sword was unsealed, even Mirage Sun, Yudu, and Yuanlong King weren't a match for Lin Feng. This also caused the prestige of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong to reach a whole new level. As time went by, no matter if it was in terms of power, prestige, or the role that they had played in the war between the two worlds, Xianmen Tianzong surpassed the Taishu Temple and became the #1 sect and sacred ground of the divine land. Compared to the long period of time, compared to the various powerful sects that had appeared in the history of the divine land, 300 years was an incomparably short period of time. Even the heavenly gate back then had taken thousands of years to reach its peak before it was destroyed. In the past, if someone was said to be able to suppress the current world in 300 years, the entire divine land, and even the entire heaven primordial world would treat it as a joke. But now, everything had become reality, and it didn't even take 300 years. Not long after Lin Feng completed the original main mission, he directly crushed the new main mission. The time limit of 300 years was directly crushed. The heavy accumulation from before finally started to show its power at this moment, bursting forth with a loud bang. Lin Feng opened his palm, and a ball of light appeared on his palm. When the light dissipated, it turned out to be a small and exquisite black pagoda. This thing is a little interesting. Lin Feng weighed the small black pagoda in his hand, trying to figure out its use and feeling its power. A faint smile appeared on his face. With the early completion of the main mission 2, 3, the system beep sounded in Lin Feng's mind again. Latest main mission 3, 1 released. Lin Feng opened the mission description and looked at the latest main mission. Main mission 3, 1 above the vault of heaven, proud of the world mission description. Congratulations to the host for leading the sect to become the #1 in the current world. The host has taken a crucial and glorious step in the construction of the sect's eternal foundation. But being #1 in the current world doesn't mean being #1 in history. Above the peak, you can see the vault of heaven. Above the vault of heaven, you can look down on the past and the present. From today onwards, the host please lead the sect on the path to become the #1 sect in the history of the heaven primordial world. And finally be proud of the past and the present. Mission time limit, 1,000 years. If the mission is not completed within the time limit, the special reward for the main mission will be cancelled. Lin Feng looked at the mission description and pondered for a moment. Although I have indeed surpassed the Taishu Temple, the advantage isn't great enough. But that's not the key. The key is that being invincible in one-on-one battles doesn't mean being invincible in everything. From now onwards, be it the divine land or the infinite mainland, everyone should have their eyes on me, right? Lin Feng's mind was very clear, but his expression was relaxed, and his lips curled into a faint smile. Chapter 1260. Just as Lin Feng thought, right now in the entire heaven primal world, be it the human clan or the demon clan, all the forces' gazes were focused on him and the celestial sect of wonders. Any small movement between him and Xianmen Tianzong would be fine if no one knew about it, but once it was known, there would be all sorts of interpretations and conjectures that would affect the judgment and decisions of countless people. Xianmen Tianzong's strength had changed slightly, and the people outside were even more sensitive than Xianmen Tianzong's own disciples. For a long period of time, the human cultivation world of the divine land only received such treatment from Taishu Temple. And now, even though the other powers still wouldn't ignore the Void Temple's every move and pay close attention to it, but the priority of paying attention to it would fall behind the celestial sect of wonders. Even the Void Temple had to pay close attention to every move of the celestial sect of wonders at this moment, paying attention to it with an even more cautious and attentive attitude than before. In this war between the two worlds, Taishu Temple could be said to have gained nothing, and even suffered heavy losses. One of the 4 elders of the Great Void, Dao Venerable Qing Yi, and the current temple master, Yan Nanlai, were dead. Dao Venerable Taiwan, Shoichi Dashin, and Dao Venerable Xianwen were all injured. The Great Void 9 Heavens Imperial Court was breached by the Yudu race. Although White Cloud Mountain wasn't destroyed, its vitality was greatly damaged. Yin Yuanjin, Xianlin Taoist, and many other Grand Elders were also injured. After this war, Taishu Temple was at its weakest moment after entering the present era. Looking at the history of Taishu Temple, it was also one of its lowest times. As Lin Feng's four swords decided the outcome of this war, the Divine Land started to launch a counterattack, taking over cities and territories in Heaven Wasteland continent, gaining the upper hand. Taishu Temple didn't join in this counterattack. They only occupied Taihua Mountain again, and started to operate again. They were extremely low-key for the rest of the time. In this victorious counterattack of the human cultivation world, they seemed abnormally different. After Dao Venerable Tai won, Shoichi Dashin, and the rest returned to White Cloud Mountain, they didn't go out. Many people felt that the Void Temple's actions were inexplicable. Although they did not obtain any solid results, and even suffered heavy losses, the pressure that the Void Temple had endured in this war between the two worlds, as well as the contributions that they had made, still existed objectively. Now that things had finally turned for the better, Taishu Temple instead kept a low profile. Such a method of giving without asking for anything in return was completely different from Taishu Temple's style in the past wars. If it was said that in the face of the Celestial Sect of Wonders who had turned the tide in this war and led the group, it did not seem to be the case. Many people couldn't help but mutter in their hearts at the abnormal behavior, and some people also fell into deep thought. And at this moment, within White Cloud Mountain, within the Void Temple, a portion of the middle and low-level Void Temple cultivators also found this hard to understand, and even felt indignant. Dao Venerable Tai One was sitting cross-legged in the open space at the top of White Cloud Mountain. His eyes were closed, and his face was slightly pale. On the open space at the top of White Cloud Mountain, Dao Venerable Tai One sat cross-legged. His eyes were closed, and his face was slightly pale. A mysterious and ethereal mirror light finally returned to the sky above White Cloud Mountain. Silently, white clouds gathered and shrouded White Cloud Mountain. Beside Dao Venerable Tai One sat a white-haired old man, and a handsome young man. They were Shoichi Dashin and Dao Venerable Xian One. However, both of them looked a little pale. Like Dao Venerable Tai One, they were injured, especially Dao Venerable Xian One. Opposite them sat the other members of Taishu Temple's Grand Supreme Elders Guild. Kuang Heng and Fu Yunkong were projected there with their dermic powers. Their real bodies were at Taihua Mountain in Infinite Wilderness. In addition to the members of Grand Supreme Elders Guild, Lin Daohan was also present. Black Scale Dragon King and Flaming Cloud Dragon King, the leaders of the dragon race in the Supreme Dragon Pool, weren't present. In the war between the two worlds, as long as they weren't enemies of the dragon race, they would follow the strong practitioners of Taishu Temple to fight the other demons. This time, Black Scale Dragon King and Flaming Cloud Dragon King naturally wouldn't follow them into the mysterious sea. Instead, they stayed behind to guard White Cloud Mountain. However, no matter if it was Mirage Sun Yudu, Green Crest Yudu, Empty Plain Yudu, or the other strong practitioners of the Yudu race, they were far from what they could fight with their union of star and soul. When the two great dragon kings came out, they would only provoke the strong practitioners of union of star and soul of Yudu race to fight. They were powerless to fill the gap in the Supreme Void Yin-Yang Great Formation, so they could only hide under the protection of the formation and White Cloud Mountain with the other cultivators of Taishu Temple with lower cultivation. When all the defensive methods were broken by the Yudu race, and they faced the last moment of close combat, only then would the dragons in the Supreme Dragon Pool come out to fight. Before that, they who had no place to use their abilities could only wait awkwardly. This time, they didn't attend the meeting because there was a special matter that the Grand Supreme Elders Guild of Taishu Temple had to deal with. It would decide who the new Taishu Temple Monastery Master would belong to after Yen Nanlai died. Dao Venerable Tai One closed his eyes and looked at Lin Daohan in front of him. He slowly said, "Daohan, the situation has changed beyond everyone's expectations. The heavy burden will be placed on you in advance." Lin Daohan knelt on the ground and kowtowed to Dao Venerable Tai One. "Disciple understands. I will definitely do my best." Beside him, Dao Venerable Qing Ning, Dao Venerable Yu Yuan, Fu Yunkong, Yin Yuanjin, and Kai Fengzhou all had calm expressions. Kuang Heng, Xianlin Taoist, and Wu Mengqi's expressions didn't change at all. After Shoichi Dashin, Quang Hung was the bigwig with the highest cultivation and the most experience in the radical faction. For his main body to go to heaven wasteland vast land at this time was equivalent to expressing the radical faction's attitude. Even though the top strong practitioners of Taishu Temple, Dao Venerable Qing Yi and Yen Nan Lai, were both bigwigs of the conservative faction, losing them would cause the power of the conservative faction in Taishu Temple to drop. However, in the current environment of the Divine Land, if Taishu Temple were to create internal chaos, it would be suicidal. Dao Venerable Tai One tapped his finger gently, and a mysterious rune that was flashing with light appeared in midair. It was the symbol of the inheritance of the Taishu Temple Monastery Master, the Great Void Inscription. After Yen Nanlai died, the Great Void Inscription separated from him and returned to White Cloud Mountain. After Dao Venerable Tai One and the others brought the Haotian Mirror back to White Cloud Mountain, they used the power of the Haotian Mirror to repair the Great Void Inscription that was on the verge of breaking. Looking at the Great Void Inscription, Lin Daohan's usually calm eyes wavered slightly, and sorrow flashed across them. Then he returned to normal. He raised the back of his left hand, and the Great Void Inscription floated over and landed on it. The mirror light fell from the top of the mountain, shrouding Lin Daohan, and the Great Void Inscription under the light. In the light, Lin Daohan's figure disappeared, and only his voice was heard. Disciple Lin Daohan will inherit the will of the past patriarchs, and do my best. The Haotian mirror shook at this moment, and its light spread out, illuminating the vast 1,000 worlds. In the sky above the top of the mountain, a huge light ball that seemed illusory yet real appeared again. It was divided into 9 layers, and it was the 9 Heavens Imperial Court. At the top of White Cloud Mountain, Quang Hung, Dao Venerable Qing Ning, and Wu Mingqi all bowed towards the light at this moment. Temple Master. Even Dao Venerable Tai One, Shoichi Dashin, and Dao Venerable Xian One lowered their heads slightly at this special moment. Temple Master. On White Cloud Mountain, all the disciples of Taishu Temple looked up at the top of the mountain, and then bowed together. After the ceremony, the 9 Heavens Imperial Court disappeared, but the mirror light that shrouded Lin Daohan did not dissipate, and his whole body was still wrapped in the light. Slowly, Dao Venerable Tai One asked, "Daohan, what's your first decision?" Lin Daohan's voice came from the light. "Even though I won't seal the mountain, my temple will once again enter a state of seclusion. Restoring the Haotian mirror will be our top priority, and at the same time, we will recuperate." Hearing Lin Daohan's decision, Dao Venerable Tai One nodded slightly. Other than Dao Venerable Xian One, Fu Yingkong, and the rest, Shoichi Dashin, Quang Hung, and the rest of the radical faction also nodded. If the Taishu Temple doesn't recover completely, it will be hard for my temple to compete with the heaven-punishing sword of the Master of Xian Men. Silently, Shoichi Dashin said, "It's true that he turned the tide in this war between the 2 worlds and helped our divine land obtain victory, but his sword is too unconventional. Even he himself can't control that sword. Once he loses control, there will be endless troubles." After a moment of silence, Dao Venerable Xian One said, "Before his heaven-punishing sword is sealed again, I observed his battle with Mirage Sun and Yudu. The concept of the Tao, skills, and concepts seem to have merged the cultivation methods of the human race and the demon race. There shouldn't be any mistake." Silently, Dao Venerable Tai One said, "I have to admit that even though my temple entered the mysterious sea because of the Master of Xian Men, the Master of Xian Men and Xianmen Tianzong under his rule played a decisive role in today's victory for the Divine Land in this war between the 2 worlds. But he's too dangerous. Once he makes a mistake, in a situation where no one can control him, his destructive power will far surpass the evil of the underworld. We have to nip it in the bud." Lin Daohan said softly, "Even if the Haotian mirror recovers completely, it will only be a situation where we are on equal footing. Any movement between us and Xianmen Tianzong will affect the situation as a whole, and in the end, the demon race will only take advantage of it. The only opportunity to change the current stalemate lies in the spiritual sea." Dao Venerable Tai One and the others all nodded. Since the spiritual sea had been reopened, Lin Feng naturally would not just stand by and watch. But he could not bring his heaven-punishing sword into the spiritual sea, Otherwise, he would be rejected and attacked by the spiritual sea. Lin Feng must also have the intention of subduing the spiritual sea. Even if he had the heaven-punishing sword in hand, and was not afraid of the power of the spiritual sea, in the face of the extreme hostility of the spiritual sea, he did not need to do anything else. He could only focus on resisting the attacks of the spiritual sea. Subduing the spiritual sea was completely out of his business. On the contrary, because of him and the heaven-punishing sword, it was possible that others could refine the spiritual sea for nothing. Back then, when Shoichi Daishin and Lin Feng fought over Ding of Shenzhou, the embarrassing encounter was a lesson learned. And without the heaven-punishing sword, even if the Haotian mirror did not fully recover, the Taishu Temple had the confidence to directly start a war with Lin Feng. Before that, we can only wait, Shoichi Daishin said indifferently, silently. Chapter 1261. Wu Mengqi said quietly, "The spiritual sea is our chance, but the master of the Xianmen Gate will definitely notice it. Maybe he will take action in advance to weaken our temple and other competitors. We have to prevent him from causing trouble." Dao Venerable Xian Yi shook his head. "Although I don't know where his limit is, he can't use his sword without limit. The Haotian mirror hasn't recovered fully, but it has returned to White Cloud Mountain with senior brother Tai and senior brother Jingyi. Even if the master of Xian Gate comes, we can't humiliate him. The attention of the Yudu clan, the primordial heavenly dragon clan, and even the primordial devil ape clan is on him. If he fights with us, it will only benefit the demon race. The master of Xian Gate won't make such a low-level mistake." He paused for a moment and looked at Wu Mengqi. "But it's unavoidable to restrict our power from other aspects. The most likely target is the Netherworld Sea. His eldest disciple, Xiaoyan, has a close connection with heaven's calamity in the Netherworld Sea, so he has a greater advantage." Wu Mengqi looked gloomy, but he didn't say anything. Shoichi Daishin said, "From the actions of the war between the two worlds, Lin Feng has completely entrusted this matter to his disciple, Xiaoyan. With Xiaoyan's power, even if he has a close connection with heaven's calamity, it won't be easy for him to refine heaven's calamity and the Netherworld Sea. Mengqi, you don't have to take the initiative to attack. Just defend your position. If you fall into a prolonged stalemate, you will succeed." As junior brother Xianyi said, "Even if Lin Feng has wild ambitions, he won't start a war with us easily." Wu Mengqi nodded. Disciple understands. No matter if it was Shoichi Daishin or Wu Mengqi, they were both radical elders of Taishu Temple. However, being radical didn't mean that they didn't know how to judge the situation and adapt to the situation. Kuang Heng and Xianlin Taoist, who were standing at the side, were calm as usual, and there was not the slightest fluctuation in their eyes. Lord Yu Yuan said coldly, "Although we need to recuperate, Xianmen Tianzong will definitely not sit back and watch us return to the peak. Even if they don't really start a war, they will still suppress and weaken us in other aspects. Our temple needs to react in time and counterattack. Even if we temporarily hide our strength and bide our time, we need to be fully prepared. We can't be held hostage by others." At this time, Kuang Heng, who looked like a child but had eyes as bleak as water, faintly said, "Find something else for Xianmen Tianzong to do, lest they keep their eyes on me." Dao Master Qing Ning's expression changed slightly. "Junior brother Kuang, you mean?" Lord Tai and Shoichi Daishin both looked at Kuang Heng and Lord Qingning. Beside them, Lord Xian explained and said softly, "At that time it was Nanlai's decision. I agreed." Kuang Heng's expression was indifferent. He turned to look at Yun Yuanjin, who had yet to recover from his serious injuries and looked dispirited. "Junior sister Yun, your previous arrangements will have to be used in another way." Yun Yuanjin's aura was a little weak, but her eyes were still calm. Hearing this, she nodded. "I understand." Dao Master Qing Ning said in a deep voice, "I hope it will be of sufficient use." At this moment, in a corner of infinite wilderness, a majestic palace flashing with purple and gold light stood in the sky, like a nine heavens immortal palace. There were layers of light and shadows above the palace, as if thousands of immortals and Buddhas were constantly shuttling between the palaces and pavilions. Outside the immortal palace, Cultivators were constantly coming and going, transporting a large number of resources that had been plundered from all over Infinite Wilderness to the Purple and Gold Palace. A middle-aged man in a dragon robe with a dignified aura sat in the palace. He was the ruler of the Great Zhou dynasty, Emperor Zhou Liangpan. This palace was naturally the creation magic treasure Grand Imperial Palace. In the palace, King Yanliang of the Great Zhou dynasty Liangfu stood below Emperor Zhou Liangpan and said softly, "Your Majesty, basically all the valuable resources in the vicinity have been collected." Liangpan nodded. "Well done." Liangfu bowed and did not say anything else. Liangpan asked calmly, "Do you think it's a pity?" "Although it's a pity, I understand Your Majesty's painstaking efforts." Liangfu sighed. "Although it's a great opportunity to expand our territory, the Great Zhou dynasty has already occupied Infinite Wilderness. It's just an enclave that takes up a lot of energy." Emperor Zhou Liangpan said. "Yes, that's right. Moreover, in terms of expansion, what can compare to the Great Zhou dynasty's westward expansion and the Great Qin dynasty's territory under our rule?" He stood up from the dragon throne and walked past King Yanliang to the entrance of the palace. He looked at the vast land in front of him. "But now that we've failed, there's nothing more to say. The key lies in the future." King Yanliang sighed and did not say anything. If West Hill City was completely destroyed, the Great Zhou dynasty could gather the dragon vein qi of the world and take the opportunity to expand westward and annex the Great Qin dynasty's territory. But now there was no hope. Although the Great Qin dynasty was weak, the emperor and officials of the Great Zhou dynasty knew that the Great Qin dynasty would lean more towards Xianmen Tianzong. At the moment when the celestial sect of wonders was gradually reaching its peak, the chances of the Great Zhou making a move were slim. Instead, they needed to think about how the Great Zhou dynasty would defend if Xianmen Tianzong stood up for the Great Qin dynasty. Leading the qi of the dragon vein to White Cloud Mountain could be explained by the righteousness of the war between the two realms. However, after White Cloud Mountain was destroyed, Liangpan used Grand Imperial Palace to direct most of the power of the backlash along the qi of the dragon vein to West Hill City. This was definitely a malicious move. West Hill City was destroyed, and Shi Zongtang and the other experts of the Great Qin dynasty were all killed. Dead people could not testify. But since West Hill City was saved by Shi Tianhao, Shi Zongtang and the others could naturally detect Liangpan's actions. It was difficult to find evidence for something like this after the fact. However, to the Mystic Gate Sky sect, there were many things that didn't matter if they had evidence or not. The Mystic Gate Sky sect and the Great Qin Empire had been working together to compress the Great Zhou Empire's space. In this war between the two worlds, the Great Zhou dynasty had benefited greatly. They had been hiding their strength and acting cautiously during the war. However, the Great Zhou Emperor, Liangpan, did not feel relaxed because Xianmen Tianzong's strength had increased greatly. Under these circumstances, after the war between the two worlds ended, the Great Zhou dynasty would be in an even worse situation. Whether it was the bloody massacre of Snowgale, the conflict between Zhu Yi and Zhu Hongwu, or the problems with the Great Qin dynasty in this war, they were all difficult to resolve. The relationship between the Great Zhou dynasty and the Taishu Temple was growing closer. The Great Zhou dynasty and Xianmen Tianzong were already inevitable to oppose each other. The conflict between Xianmen Tianzong and the Taishu Temple would also affect the Great Zhou dynasty. The Great Zhou dynasty had no choice but to rely on the Taishu Temple to hold on. Although the Taishu Temple has suffered great losses this time, its foundation is still there. If Xianmen Tianzong wants to destroy it, they have to worry about the movements of the Yao race. The Great Zhou Emperor Liangpan knew. This way, their next target in the Divine Land will most likely be me and the Great Zhou dynasty. But I can't back down. Liangpan looked up at the ceiling of the hall. There was a ball of light there. It did not look dazzling, but it seemed to contain deep principles. It was unfathomable, indescribable, and indescribable. It's a pity that I could not make the king of the underworld stay. Otherwise, I could increase my strength to deal with the upcoming situation. The Great Zhou Emperor Liangpan thought. The Great Zhou Emperor Liangfu looked at the ball of light on the ceiling and was shocked. Your Majesty, this seems to be. Liangpan came back to his senses and looked at him. He said lightly, "That's right. It is Taishu Temple's all-sky Taishu light. It's a pity that it is extremely difficult to understand its profoundness. But it is not a problem to use it for a while." Liang Fu's eyes flashed and his expression was uncertain. "Is it when your majesty sent the qi of the dragon vein and the power of the imperial palace to Baiyun Mountain? But your majesty, they had already offended Xianmen Tianzong, and now they were plotting against Taishu Temple. If Taishu Temple found out, it would be even worse for the great Zhou dynasty. Although they had obtained the all-sky Taishu light that they had been dreaming of, it was still not worth it. The losses far outweighed the gains." In Liang Fu's impression, Liang Pan was not such an unwise person. He only hoped that Liang Pan would not be blinded by the pressure brought by Xianmen Tianzong. Liang Pan looked at Liang Fu indifferently. "Do you think Taishu Temple does not know? They knew at that time. This is their tacit consent. But in the current situation we have gained this, which means that we have to pay a price. It is difficult to hold back." Liang Fu's face showed a look of realization. His uncertain expression calmed down, but what followed was a bitter smile. The great Zhou dynasty had used such a method in the past, but at that time they were the givers. Now they were the ones who were forced to take advantage of others. Back then, after the Battle of Yinghai, the great Zhou dynasty still prioritized providing resources to Eastern Heavenly Gate to repair the Xiantian seal. After that, in the battle to destroy Xianxian, Eastern Heavenly Gate became the great Zhou dynasty's vanguard and gave their all. There was no free lunch in this world. The same logic applied. But now, the one who gave their all was the great Zhou dynasty, and they could not reject it. The great Zhou dynasty needed to seize every opportunity to increase their strength. Liang Fu hesitated for a moment before saying, "Your Majesty, the conflict between our dynasty and Xianmen Tianzong is actually not irreconcilable. The matter of Snowgale is actually easy to deal with. Great Qin can just give up some benefits. It's just that the Grand Preceptor..." Liang Pan shook his head. "If that's the case, Hongwu will be completely crippled." Liang Fu was silent. After a while he said softly, "Even if we rely on Tianjing City, it will not be easy to resist Xianmen Tianzong. What exactly is our dynasty?" Liang Pan let out a soft breath and looked into the distance. Silently he said, "Yinghai." Although Xianmen Tianzong controls the Yingzhou Spirit Mountain, it is far from being completely controlled by Xianmen Tianzong. As long as they can control a spirit mountain in the Yinghai, the spirit mountain will disappear without a trace. No matter how sharp Xianmen Tianzong's heaven-punishing sword is, it will not be able to do anything. Chapter 1262. Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou stood in the Grand Imperial Palace. He opened his palm, and there was a talisman in his palm. The talisman was constantly shining. Liang Fu stood beside him and looked at the talisman. After a while he looked surprised. "Your Majesty, this talisman seems to be related to Fangzhong Mountain ending ocean." Liang Pan said silently, "That's right. Although we lost Fangzhong Mountain, we have had it for a long time. We have been studying it over the years and have finally gained something. With this talisman, we can find Fangzhong Mountain again." Liang Pan said silently, "The master of the Daoist Xianmen shocked Ying Ocean with his sword. Although he did not let the 3 mountains of Ying Ocean reappear, the talisman reacted at that time. This way, we have a chance to find Fangzhong Mountain again. With Fangzhong Mountain, we can hide in it. Unless the entire Ying Ocean is destroyed, Lin Feng will not be able to find us even if he has Yingzhou Mountain." Hearing this, Liang Fu nodded. "I understand." To this day, the most regretful thing in the Great Zhou dynasty was that Lin Feng used Mount Penglai to knock down Mount Fangzhong during the Battle of the Yingxi back then. That was the biggest turning point in the development of the Great Zhou dynasty in recent years. It had a far-reaching impact. Not only did they lose the opportunity to occupy Ying Ocean, but they also lost the large amount of resources produced by Fangzhong Mountain. The most important impact was that the Great Zhou dynasty lost their path of retreat and confidence. They lost their strategic depth. Under the management of the Great Zhou dynasty for many years, Tianjing City's defense was extremely strong. With Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu as well as the Grand Imperial Palace and the Great Celestial Wheel, the 2 creation treasures, They were even stronger than the Mount Shu sword sect after the Battle of Shu Mountain. However, losing Fangzhong Mountain meant that when the opponent stepped on Tianjing City, the Great Zhou dynasty would have no way of retreat. With their backs against the cliff, they could only fight to the death with their opponents. Tianjing City fell, Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu were defeated. The fate of the Great Zhou dynasty was basically decided. Even if Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu could escape and rise again, they would lose their cornerstone. With Fangzhong Mountain as support, the Great Zhou dynasty could retreat to Fangzhong Mountain at the last moment. After the mountain was hidden, it would cover the entire ocean, making it difficult for others to find it. In recent years, the Great Zhou's space has become more and more narrow. Their autonomy has gradually decreased. Under the pressure of the Xianmen Sky sect and the Great Qin dynasty, they are leaning more and more towards the Void Temple. This is directly related to them losing the Fangzhong Immortal Mountain to the point that they are seriously lacking in confidence when facing Linfeng in Tianjing City. If Fangzhong Mountain had been under the Great Zhou dynasty, they would still have a lot of room and would not be in the current predicament. In these few years, Linfeng and the Xiangate Sky sect were able to do things with ease. On one hand, it was because outside of Kunlun Mountain, where the Real Mountain Gate was located, Mount Yujing was hidden in the void. It was difficult for others to find it. On the other hand, it was also because they occupied the Immortal Mountain in the Yangtze. It was also difficult for outsiders to find traces. With these two layers of insurance, even when Yujing Mountain revealed itself, Xianmen Tianzong still had a way out. Liang Pan was now planning to revisit the Fangzhong Immortal Mountain. Not only was it out of consideration for the Great Zhou dynasty to increase its strength and regain its hope of rising again, it was also an inevitable choice that he was forced to make. This choice would undoubtedly make Xianmen Tianzong turn his attention to the Great Zhou dynasty. After all, Xianmen Tianzong was the only force that had occupied an immortal mountain in Yinghai. Hence, they would naturally pay more attention to this place. At the same time, they would fight for the other immortal mountains, so that they would have a greater advantage. Unfortunately, other than this, the Great Zhou dynasty had no other path to take. After West Hill City was secured, if the Great Zhou dynasty wanted to quickly increase their strength, this was the most feasible method. After all, other than Xianmen Tianzong, the revival of Buddhism was not good news for the Great Zhou dynasty. Of course, it was also because of this that the Great Zhou dynasty received further support from the Taishu Temple. This was a tacit understanding between the Taishu Temple and the Great Zhou dynasty. However, this harvest was unable to make Emperor Liang Pan feel relaxed. However, Liang Pan was no ordinary person after all. His heart and will were firm. He shook his head and said to Liang Fu, "Go. After collecting all the resources in this area, we will return to the Divine Land and prepare for the next step." Liang Fu nodded and said, "As you wish." The war between the two worlds had yet to end, but the general situation was set. Under Lin Feng's deterrence, the demon race would not be able to raise any more waves. However, Yudu, the dragon race, the ape race, and the other great demons had also attracted Lin Feng's attention. This was the best time for the Great Zhou dynasty to plan. When the war between the two worlds was completely over, Xianmen Tianzong would be free, and the Great Zhou dynasty would not be able to do anything. Even though he didn't know what the limit of Lin Feng's heaven punishment sword was, there was no doubt that the earlier the Great Zhou dynasty made their move, the better. The longer they delayed, the more time they would give Lin Feng. Since they had made up their minds, the entire Great Zhou dynasty made a prompt decision, and the huge machinery of the country started to operate. After Liang Fu took his leave, Liang Pan stood on the spot silently and pondered for a moment. Then he swiped his palm in the air and light flashed, revealing the appearance of a sealed space. In that space, a middle-aged man wearing embroidered robes and a golden crown was sitting cross-legged. It was the imperial preceptor of the Great Zhou dynasty, Marquis of Xuanji Zhu Hongwu. Zhu Hongwu opened his eyes and looked at Emperor Liang Pan. He bowed and said, "This subject's greeting is inconvenient. May your majesty forgive me." He was at a critical juncture in his cultivation. Liang Pan naturally knew with a glance and waved his hand. "Hongwu, no need to be so polite." Zhu Hongwu said, "The future star-glazed Buddha will be born. causing the path of cause and effect between heaven and earth to change in a mysterious way. This subject has been carefully comprehending these days, and has already gained some understanding. Only the last barrier is not broken through. Luckily, I did not ruin your Majesty's plans. Liang Pan said, the situation of the war between the two worlds has changed drastically. There is not much time left for you, Hongwu. However, we hope that you can slow down a bit. Oh. Zhu Hongwu was slightly surprised and looked at Liang Pan in confusion. Liang Pan flicked his finger, and a portion of the Taishu mysterious light that filled the sky above the Grand Imperial Palace fell in front of Zhu Hongwu. Zhu Hongwu's eyes surged with divine light. He instantly recognized this indescribable radiance in front of him. He took a deep breath, and this radiance attached itself to his body. The acupoints all over Zhu Hongwu's body started to vibrate. Your Majesty, this subject needs some time. Zhu Hongwu pondered for a moment, and let out a long breath. He said, this way, after I fuse with the Tao, my power will exceed my expectations. Liang Pan said, this is exactly what I hoped for. Although time is tight, Hongwu, you just need to calm down. Zhu Hongwu bowed and replied, this subject will not disappoint your Majesty. The illusion of light and shadow in Zhu Hongwu's figure disappeared at the same time. Liang Pan closed his eyes slightly, and stood quietly in the main hall of the Imperial Dowager Palace. After a long time, he opened his eyes again and muttered to himself, next, it's the most difficult and crucial moment. As one of the forces in this war between the two worlds, the Great Zhou Empire did not wait for the war to completely end and gradually withdrew from the main battlefield. Other than attacking some medium-class worlds and foreign dimensions outside the lonely chosen realm, the Great Zhou Empire, under the leadership of the Emperor of Zhou, Liang Pan, left Infinite Wasteland and returned to the capital. At this point, the war between the two worlds gradually came to an end. The top experts of the human race and the demon race gradually turned to a state of confrontation, while the younger generations of both sides continued to fight. However, the intensity of the war was completely different from before. Among them, the outstanding younger disciples of Xianmen Tianzong once again shone brightly and attracted the attention of the world. Among them, the most dazzling one was the third disciple of the master of Xianmen, Dao Yuding of Linju's lineage, Wang Lin of Xianmen's lineage. In a bloody battle, with her cultivation of late-stage Yuanying and heavenly law's embodiment, she brazenly killed a demon race great saint of the immortal demon soul realm. In addition, the fifth disciple of the master of Xianmen, Yang Qingji of Nirvana Cave, Zhou Yunsong of Xianmen's lineage, Tang Jun of Funtianya's lineage, Xiaoyan of Xianmen's lineage, Tang Jun of Funtianya's lineage, Luo Qinggu of Xianmen's lineage, Han Yang of Xianmen's lineage. Although their cultivation level was lower than Dao Yuding's, they all achieved brilliant results and amazed the world. The second disciple of the master of Xianmen's lineage, Zhu Yi of Qiantian Palace, Xiaoyan of Xianmen's lineage, Lin Tong of Xianmen's lineage, and the seventh disciple of the master of Xianmen's lineage, Shi Tianhao of Xianmen's lineage, Huang Jinting of Desolate Sky Valley, were all well known. Although Dao Yuding, Tang Jun and the others had not yet reached the primordial spirit realm, the primordial spirit realm experts of the human cultivation world in the Divine Land could no longer treat them as Yuanying stage cultivators, but had to treat them as equals. And what made everyone's heart even more awe-inspiring was that after Dao Yuding and the others, Li Xingfei, Lu Xiaofeng, Zhao Huan, Tan Yinqing, Zhuge Wanqiu and the others followed closely behind. The other younger disciples were also outstanding, and the strength of any one of them was enough to shock the cultivators of the other forces in the Divine Land. In addition to the second-generation disciples, the third generation of true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong also began to show their extraordinary talents, shining with amazing brilliance. Han Yang's disciple Lian Huazhao, Li Xingfei's disciple Chen Fangge, Ying Luo's disciple Meng Honglu, Huang Jinting's disciple Shi Yang. In this war, the geniuses under Xianmen Tianzong emerged one after another, as if forming a monstrous force that was unstoppable. In this war between the two worlds, the human cultivators basically won a complete victory. In terms of the quality and quantity of the demon clan experts killed, compared to the previous wars between the two worlds, it was not very outstanding, but in terms of resources and space, it could be said to be extremely brilliant. With the passage of time, the war between the two worlds finally ended, and the various forces also began to count their own gains and losses. Some people were happy, and some people were sad. However, at this moment, most of the forces in the Divine Land unanimously sent representatives to Yujing Mountain, which had returned to the Kunlun mountain range, to request to meet the master of Xianmen Lin Feng. Chapter 1263. Lin Feng guarded Jade Capital Mountain. Jade Capital Mountain returned to the Kunlun mountain range. Even though he did not personally head to the vast heaven wasteland, his existence still continued to influence the course of the subsequent stages of the war between the two worlds. As the war between the two realms gradually came to an end, the other forces in the Divine Land began to send representatives to the Kunlun Mountains at the same time. Generally speaking, it was to congratulate the 8 personal disciples of the Master of Xianmen for all attaining the primordial soul realm. The difficulty of attaining the primordial soul realm was almost greater than the total difficulty of all the previous stages on the path of cultivation. Attaining the primordial soul realm would naturally increase one's lifespan. From then on, one would cross the barrier of heaven and man, and the whole world would no longer be the same. There was an old saying in the Divine Land that a genius who died young was not a genius, and those who attained the primordial soul realm would undoubtedly have their potential completely transformed into actual strength. If an ordinary sect had a primordial soul expert, it would be a joyous event that would affect the continuation of the fate of the entire sect. It was a big event worthy of inviting friends and colleagues to celebrate. In some areas, it would even affect the power structure of the area to a certain extent. Even for forces like Taishu Temple, Mount Shu, Xianmen Tianzong, and the Great Lane Temple, it was undoubtedly a joyous event if someone in the sect reached the primordial soul realm. Since Xiao Yan and the other 3 had attained the primordial soul realm in a short period of time in the previous battle, the deep foundation of Xianmen Tianzong had once again exploded in the course of the war between the two realms. Yu Hongyan Yangqing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu had all succeeded in attaining the primordial soul realm. At this point, Lin Feng's 8 personal disciples had all attained the primordial soul realm, which made the celebration even more intense. At the same time, it also made the other people in the Divine Land even more impressed. The sect master of Xian Gate is full of heroes, all of them are geniuses. This kind of saying had already started to spread many years ago. And today, when Xiao Yan and the others all became primordial spirits, it once again made the saying of the past become rampant. As the war between the two realms gradually came to an end, and Xiao Yan and the others returned to Kunlun Mountain, Xianmen Tianzong also announced to the world that it would once again open its doors to accept disciples. When the news spread, the entire Divine Land was shaken again. The vast majority of the human cultivation world powers all headed towards Kunlun Mountain to see Lin Feng, either in the name of congratulations or in the name of attending the ceremony. On one hand, they wanted to participate in this grand event together and deepen their relationship with the new number 1 Holy Land, which was now above Taishu Temple. On the other hand, they wanted to understand Lin Feng's next thoughts and Xianmen Tianzong's next move, so that they could adjust their strategy. Among the forces close to Xianmen Tianzong, the Great Qin Dynasty, the Purple Sky Dao, the Northern Militant Imperial Court, and so on all arrived at the first moment. The Northern Militant Royal Court wasn't too bad. They didn't suffer any losses in the war between the two realms, and after the successful counterattack, their harvest was even more plentiful. This time, the Northern Militant First Chan Yu personally visited. He went to Infinite Wasteland with Shi Tianhao and the others and returned to the Divine Land together after the war was over. The Great Qin Dynasty's situation was much worse. They suffered heavy losses and almost collapsed. Even though they had some gains in the counterattack, it was far from their previous losses. At this time, the other sects and forces wouldn't be courteous to the Great Qin Dynasty, just because they had suffered heavy losses. The Great Qin Dynasty didn't have such extravagant hopes, and could only try to gather resources to restore its vitality. Not only the capital, West Hill City, but the entire Great Qin Dynasty was also waiting to be rebuilt. The new emperor of the Great Qin Dynasty, Shi Zongtang, was indeed unable to leave. Only the second in command, Monarch Zhenyang, Shizongmao, came to Kunlun Mountain to congratulate them. This was something that couldn't be helped. Previously, during the counterattack on Infinite Wasteland, Shizongmao, who hadn't recovered from his injuries, braced himself and led the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty to the demon realm with the others. Purple Cloud Dao was one of the forces that attacked Infinite Wasteland in the early stages of the war. However, because the experts of the Dragon Clan suddenly came out of the Xian Sea and attacked the Great Qin dynasty, they were caught in the crossfire. Many elders and young elites of the sect suffered heavy losses. Even Dao Master Blue Thunder, who led the team, narrowly escaped death. If it weren't for Zhu Yi's timely rescue, Dao Master Blue Thunder would have definitely died under the claws of Flame Dragon King. Even though Dao Master Blue Thunder survived with Zhu Yi's help at the critical moment, the Purple Cloud Dao's incarnation level magic treasure, the Blue Thunder Evil Destroying Saber, was completely destroyed. Later, at the end of the war, Lin Feng's four swords determined the fate of the human clan. After the war, the experts of Purple Cloud Dao, under the command of Dao Master Thundercloud, killed their way to Infinite Wasteland, making up for their losses. But for Dao Master Thundercloud and the Purple Cloud Dao, the next change in the situation of the Divine Land undoubtedly depended on Xianmen Tianzong's actions. This former ally had become so powerful that Purple Cloud Dao was willing to stay by his side. Beirong First Chanyu, King Rose Sun Shizongmao, Dao Master Thundercloud, and others were all received by Lin Feng. Their entourage also rested on the peak of the Kunlun mountain range, and there was someone to receive them. A young man in a white robe looked at the crowd in front of him and said with a faint smile, "Everyone, please rest here." Looking at the white-robed young man in front of them, everyone cupped their hands and saluted. "Thank you, Master Eternal River." This white-robed young man was naturally Kong Nanhua. Before the war between the two realms, he cultivated in seclusion and only came out in the middle of the war, successfully reaching the Essence Soul realm. Although he was not a direct disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, he was the earliest protector of the sect since Xianmen Tianzong founded. He had a good personal relationship with Lin Feng, the master of the Xianmen sect. At the same time, he reached the Essence Soul realm, and his supernatural power was also extraordinary, so the cultivators of other forces naturally respected him. Everyone went to their respective residences. In the crowd of the Purple Cloud Dao, a woman in cyan took a deep breath and smiled. Beside her stood a black-robed young man. He was tall and handsome, and his facial features were delicate like a woman's. However, his eyes were cold, so he did not look feminine at all. The black-robed young man said with a voice transmission, "You used to stay on Yujing Mountain, right? I think the abundance of spiritual qi, there is more than on the peak of the Cloud Dao." The woman in cyan curled her lips slightly and replied with a voice transmission, "Of course. I mainly lived in the barren Sky Valley at that time. Although the flow of spiritual qi contains the primitive qi of the wilderness, it has its own meaning. The total amount of spiritual qi is so abundant that it almost condenses into a physical form. Walking in it is like soaking in water." The woman in cyan glanced at the young man and said with a faint smile, "Why, Xianyi, do you want to go up and have a look?" The black-robed young man named Xianyi shook his head. "It's better not to be too special. After all, we came with the sect this time." The woman in cyan was the current direct disciple of the Purple Cloud Dao, the daughter of the Jun family in the ancient Yuan Tian realm, Jun Zining. She looked back at Xianyi with a smile. "Then why did you ask me?" Xianyi said frankly, "I really yearn for the legendary Yujing Mountain, so I asked you, but I don't want to be unique." Jun Zining snorted, "You're honest." Seeing her like this, Xianyi could not help but shake his head and laugh. His usual cold eyes became extremely gentle. "Sister Zining is not going up the mountain, so Xiaowu will have to come down to see you." Suddenly, a burst of laughter rang in their ears. The two of them turned to look and saw a young girl dressed in purple standing outside the door. Her elegance made many feel ashamed of their inferiority, and the sharp sword intent hidden within her was something that only primordial divinity realm cultivators could vaguely sense, and they were shocked by it. The girl in purple was naturally Luo Qinggu. When Jun Zining saw her, she cheered and hurriedly walked forward. Luo Qingwu also walked in with a smile. The two held hands and giggled. The relationship between the two was the same as it was in the beginning. It had not been eroded by the passage of time and the gap in cultivation. They met again. Luo Qingwu turned her head and glanced at Xianyi. Then she looked at Jun Zining with a smile. "Oh, Sister Zining, is this the one you always mention?" Jun Zining coughed, patted her and interrupted. "I haven't introduced him to you yet. This is my senior brother, Xianyi. He was my father's disciple when I was still a child. Before we knew each other, he had already entered the Zixiao path. Later, I also entered the Zixiao path and met him." "Oh." Luo Qingwu smiled mischievously. "So he really is." Jun Zining used both hands to tear her mouth. "Your mouth deserves to be torn apart." Xianyi looked at Luo Qingwu and silently bowed. "Elder Luo, Xianyi of Zixiao Path greets you." There was nothing wrong with Jun Zining and Luo Qingwu talking and laughing freely, but for him, the peerless woman in purple in front of him was first and foremost a primordial soul powerhouse. Moreover, she was a great sword cultivator whose strength was far superior to ordinary primordial soul embodiment cultivators. Luo Qingwu smiled slightly. "No need to stand on ceremony. Our two families have a good relationship, and sometimes we can exchange seniority. However, it is normal for us to address each other as fellow Taoist." Xianyi smiled and nodded, but did not say much. Jun Zining held Luo Qingwu's hand and said seriously, "Xiaowu, congratulations on attaining the primordial soul realm and achieving immortality." Luo Qingwu smiled and said, "It's all thanks to the sex nurturing. I'm still far behind my senior brothers and sisters." The two of them reunited after a long time, so they were naturally overjoyed. However, when they thought of Gulei and Li Kueyin who died in the war between the two realms, they felt sad. Not only Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, and Yu Hongyan but also Luo Qingwu and Li Kueyin had a deep friendship. After Jun Zining entered Zixiao Path, she also received a lot of care from Li Kueyin. Now that she had passed away, both Luo Qingwu and Jun Zining were sad. As time passed, more and more powerhouses from various forces came to Kunlun Mountain. The ancient longevity world, the Great Qin dynasty, the Purple Sky Path, the Northern Militant Royal Court, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, the Celeritas Sword Sect, the Wilderness Sword Sect, the Sun Moon Sword Sect, and the Heavenly Sword Sect all sent people to congratulate him. Even the Great Zhou dynasty, Songhai Sword Sect, Reincarnation Sect, Blaze Sword Sect, as well as overseas individual cultivators and Luofu Immortal Island also sent people to congratulate them. Perhaps to avoid awkwardness, no one from Mount Shu Sword Sect came. Only Ji Wenrui sent a voice transmission to express his congratulations. After the war, Heavenly Sword Sect and the other 8 sects naturally wanted an explanation from Mount Shu Sword Sect. Xianmen Tianzong did not participate too much and let them handle it themselves. He also did not ask much after the matter. After a period of preparation, another opening ceremony of the Celestial Sect of Wonders was held. After the end of the war between the two realms, the world came to congratulate them. Chapter 1264. Although there were already internal plans and arrangements, as well as early-stage plans that were in full swing, someone from the Great Zhou dynasty still came to Kunlun Mountain this time. The person who came was none other than the supreme ruler of the Great Zhou dynasty, Emperor Zhou Liangpan. Liangpan was currently sitting in the Great Hall of All Heavens at the top of Jade Capital Mountain. On the main seat, a purple-clothed youth sat there, his fingers lightly tapping the armrest of the chair. Naturally, it was the owner of this place, Lin Feng. And the person opposite Liangpan was Lin Feng's second disciple, Zhu Yi. No matter if it was the host Lin Feng, Zhu Yi, or the guest Liangpan, they all had calm expressions. Silently Liangpan said, "The bloodline of the Snowgale Country royal family still has a branch. I can make arrangements. After the Snowgale Country is rebuilt, with the support of your disciple, I believe no one will dare offend it." As he spoke, he looked towards Zhu Yi. "I can issue an edict to confer the title of ruler on your mother, and take a step further in enjoying incense. The 10 western provinces of the Great Zhou dynasty can all build temples for your mother, and worship her spirit tablet." Lin Feng sat on the main seat. Hearing this, he didn't say anything, instead looking at Liang Pan with interest. Meng Bingyun conferring the title of ruler, and taking a step further in enjoying the incense of the 10 provinces. In terms of secular etiquette and status, she completely surpassed Zhu Hongwu's official wife, Xiao Qingqing's clone, Madame Xiao of the House of Xuanji. From the perspective of the Great Zhou dynasty and the House of Xuanji, this was Liang Pan using the power of the emperor to interfere in the family matters of his own subjects. It was hard to avoid making Zhu Hongwu and Madame Xiao lose face. But to Zhu Hongwu, even though he was used to being domineering, always grasping everything in his hands and following the etiquette he believed in, loyalty to the ruler was the etiquette he first abided by. So even though there was anger in his heart, Zhu Hongwu would still accept this edict and follow Liang Pan's decision. To him, this was him sacrificing his private interests for the sake of the Great Zhou dynasty, enduring humiliation for the greater good. This could be said to be the biggest concession that Liang Pan could make. Although Xianmen Tianzong's power was great, if Liang Pan were to abandon his important official to protect himself, then he would not be fit to be an emperor. The hearts of the people of the Great Zhou dynasty would also completely scatter. The vast majority of people in the world had their own bottom line. The height of the bottom line might vary, but once it was crossed, there would definitely be a rebound and no longer give in. Although Liang Pan's proposal was a slap to Zhu Hongwu's face, it was not what Zhu Yi wanted. Silently, he raised his head and looked at Liang Pan. Your Majesty, the Emperor of Zhou, bestowed the title of Lord upon my mother. I am extremely grateful for that. As for enjoying the incense, there is no need for that. I only hope that my Lord Father can come to my mother's grave to do something. At the same time, Xiao Qingqing, who caused my mother's death, must also pay the price. Emperor of Zhou Liang Pan was silent. The matter of Xiao Qingqing could be discussed later. As for what Zhu Yi wanted Zhu Hongwu to do in front of Meng Bingyun's grave, Liang Pan could roughly guess what it was. But this matter, even if Zhu Hongwu himself agreed, Liang Pan would definitely not agree. That would mean that Zhu Hongwu's Dao heart would collapse and his martial will would collapse. Liang Pan turned his head to look at Lin Feng. Lin Feng smiled faintly and did not say anything. This matter was completely up to Zhu Yi to decide. He would not interfere. We will have the Ministry of Justice investigate the matter of your mother's death. Seeing this, Liang Pan understood. He sighed and looked at Zhu Yi. Hearing this, Lin Feng and Zhu Yi's eyebrows raised slightly. They already understood Liang Pan's thoughts and determination. Zhu Yi nodded and did not say anything else. He stood up and bowed to Lin Feng. Master, disciple will go and make arrangements for the ceremony. Lin Feng waved his hand. Inform Nanhua to bring the other guests to the All Heavens Great Hall to watch the ceremony. Zhu Yi replied, Yes, master. After he left, Lin Feng did not say anything else. His expression was calm as he lightly tapped his fingers on the armrest. Emperor of Zhou Liang Pan had already made his decision. His expression also relaxed. Silently, he sat to the side and calmly waited for the ceremony to begin. With Lin Feng's current bearing and status, he would not be in any danger on Jade Capital Mountain. But Liang Pan could roughly imagine what would happen in the future. Liang Pan could only sigh inwardly at what was about to happen. Very soon, under Kong Nanhua's lead, King Ryangshi Zhongmao, Baron Great Chanyu, Thundercloud Taoist Master, Thunderbolt Swordsman, Flowing Light Swordsman, Tongtian Swordsman and the others all arrived at the All Heavens Great Hall. Emo Shuluo and Shin Qifeng had both died. The king of the underworld's control over the reincarnation sect had almost completely disappeared. At the moment, the reincarnation sect was in chaos, but it was gradually becoming unified again. As the #1 power in the Divine Land, even if the reincarnation sect had not completely settled down, they still attached great importance to Xianmen Tianzong's actions. The reincarnation sect's infernal sage, who was old friends with Xianmen Tianzong, personally came to Kunlun Mountain to congratulate him. Apart from this, the sect master of the Vast Sea Sword sect, Sword Sage of the Vast Sea, was still in seclusion. This time, it was Sword Sage of the Emerald Wave who came to visit. As for the Blaze Sword sect, which had followed the lead of Shu Mountain before the Xian extermination battle, it was the sect master of the Blaze Sword sect, Sword Sage of the Blaze Fire, who personally came to visit. Relatively speaking, the one who was most unexpected was the Dao Integration Stage itinerant cultivator Dao Master Luofu, who personally came to visit. However, when the big shots present saw him, they all calmly greeted him. The itinerant cultivator leader of the Arctic IC region, Dao Master IC, who had met once during the opening of the Kuanpeng hidden treasure, also took the initiative to congratulate him. From all over the world, almost all the forces in the human cultivation world of the Divine Land sent representatives over. Moreover, they were all important figures of their respective forces. No one came to visit Taishu Temple, but everyone present was not surprised. Just a few days ago, the new temple master of Taishu Temple, Lin Daohan, had already announced that in the following days, White Cloud Mountain would be directly sealed off. The cultivators of Taishu Temple would no longer continue to walk on the Divine Land. As for Lin Feng's disciples who had all reached the primordial spirit realm, Lin Daohan also sent a voice transmission to congratulate them. As for Shu Mountain, it seemed to want to avoid embarrassment, and also sent a voice transmission to congratulate them. At this moment, Sword Master Tong Tian, Sword Master Thunderous, and the others were in the All Heavens Hall. Their expressions were normal, and they did not say much. After the end of the war between the two worlds, Shu Mountain Sword Sect also announced to the public that they would continue to seal off the mountain. Lin Feng sat on the main seat. Silently, he watched the crowd enter the hall. The space in the All Heavens Hall seemed to be infinite. Other than Liang Pan, Shizong Mao, Sword Master Tong Tian, Dao Master Thundercloud, and other big shots, the rest of the people, regardless of their cultivation level, also entered the hall together. The All Heavens Hall seemed to have no end. With thousands of people in it, not only did it not feel crowded, but it was also very spacious. It was as if everyone was in the sea of stars. When everyone arrived, Lin Feng said with a smile, "Thank you, fellow cultivators, for coming to Kunlun to attend the ceremony. I thank you in advance." Everyone said they did not dare. Lin Feng gently pointed his finger in the void, and a light and shadow illusion appeared, showing the scene of the heart-reflecting staircase at the foot of the cloud peak in the Kunlun mountain range at the foot of Yujing Mountain. In front of the heart-reflecting staircase, under the guidance of the outer sect steward and true disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, there were people who had passed the preliminary selection and came to the Kunlun mountain range to become disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. Each of them looked at the heart-reflecting staircase in front of them, as if they were on a pilgrimage, looking at the cloud peak that seemed to go straight to the sky. Liang Pan, Shizong Mao, Dao Master Thundercloud, and the others did not find this mentality strange. They also had some understanding of the heart-reflecting staircase of Xianmen Tianzong. Ever since Xianmen Tianzong established the sect, there had often been people who tried to mix in the sand, but everyone had failed without exception. But now, no one had similar ideas. On the one hand, it was because they could not succeed. On the other hand, it was because of the current conditions and status of Xianmen Tianzong. Most people could clearly see which side was more worthy of their loyalty and development. The next development was the same as the opening ceremony of the Celestial Sect of Wonders. Some people passed the test, while others were eliminated. Those who failed the test would be guided by the outer sect steward of Xianmen Tianzong. Those who were willing to stay in Cloud Mirror City, Sand Continent City, or the mysterious Heaven Realm to continue waiting for opportunities would be properly arranged. Those who wanted to return home would also be arranged to be sent back home. However, a considerable number of sects who came to watch the ceremony were also staring at those who failed to pass the test to become disciples. To them, there were many talents who were cherished. As for the people who passed the test and successfully ascended the cloud peak to become the disciples of Xianmen Tianzong, before they could calm their joy, the scene in front of them suddenly changed. In the All Heavens Hall on Yujing Mountain, Lin Feng gently clapped his hands. The entire Yujing Mountain suddenly shook. The branches and leaves of the mysterious Heaven Treasure Tree at the top of the mountain trembled. The Yin-Yang Sea at the foot of the mountain surged violently. The vast cyclic purple qi also seemed to be boiling, fluctuating in the void. The dome of the All Heavens Hall suddenly changed. It seemed to connect the boundless sky and the starry sky of the universe. Thousands of stars flashed together, the light becoming more and more dazzling, like countless bright golden lamps, covering the hall with starlight. As for the group of new disciples who had passed the test, they had also been moved to the All-Heavens Hall. Lin Feng calmly stood in the middle of the galaxy, as if he was the center of the world. He still seemed to be the size of a normal person, but he gave people a feeling that he filled the world, as if his body was incomparably huge. Silently Liang Pan, Shi Zhongmao, Beirong First Chanyu and the others sat where they were. Unknowingly, the seats between them had become very far apart. Each of them occupied a small star, scattered around Lin Feng. The Yuanying ancestors, golden elixir cultivators, and foundation establishment cultivators of the various forces followed closely behind their primordial soul experts, watching the scene in front of them in surprise. Lin Feng gently flicked his finger, and the void opened in all directions, connecting to the divine land of the heaven primordial world. In the Xiantian world and the Kunlun mountain range in Xianmentianzong's back garden, many light and shadow illusions appeared in the sky, allowing people living in these areas to clearly see everything that was happening in the All-Heavens Hall. In the eyes of mortals, it was like a miracle. At this moment, Lin Feng's voice resounded throughout the vast land of the divine land. I am Lin Feng. Today, I will bless my disciple with an honorific title. Fellow Taoists in the world shall bear witness. Chapter 1265. When a human cultivator reached the primordial soul stage, he could be called a Tao Lord. The so-called honorific title was the title given to him by the outside world after he reached the primordial soul stage. Sometimes it was not necessarily a certain Tao Lord. For example, Li Yao of the Great Zhou dynasty was usually called Cloud Immortal. The honorific title was usually given by the cultivator's master or elders. If the master or elders died early, the cultivator would give the honorific title himself. In most cases, the Taoist title was directly changed to honorific title, but there were exceptions. Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao had reached the primordial soul stage for some time, but Lin Feng did not give them honorific titles. Xiao Yan and the other three did not mind. They were also happy to wait for the 8 of them to reach the primordial soul stage together and shock the world. Moreover, whether it was because they were Lin Feng's personal disciples or because of their endless potential and powerful strength, it did not matter whether they had honorific titles or not. But Liang Pan, Shi Zhongmao, Sword Lord Tong Tian, and the others all looked solemn, because the ceremony in front of them was a signal sent by the master of the Celestial Gate, Lin Feng. Today's ceremony would be spread to the world. Lin Feng officially gave honorific titles to his disciples, indicating that the first generation of Celestial Gate's disciples, Lin Feng's personal disciples, had truly finished their apprenticeship. In essence, this was just a formality, but for Lin Feng and his disciples, Xianmentianzong, it meant that they had taken a step further to make their voices heard in the divine land, and their influence was further expanded. In this ceremony, the bell of creation will ring 16 times. Future generations can bear witness to it, and it will be the eternal symbol of the sect. As he spoke, a huge bronze bell appeared above Lin Feng's head. It was full of contradictions. At first glance, it felt extremely small as a speck of dust, but at the next glance, it felt extremely huge, so big that it covered the sky. A strange feeling filled everyone's mind. When they stared at the bell, it was as if they saw the most primordial chaos. Then, as the bell rang, the primordial chaos transformed into the primitive universe. Then billions of stars were born and destroyed, everything in the world was formed, and countless lives were born and then disappeared. The bell was none other than Lin Feng's treasure, the bell of good fortune. Along with the ringing of the bell of creation, 8 paths of light extended out in different directions with Lin Feng as the center. In the void, the end of a path of starlight was the first to burn, as if a sea of fire had been ignited in the sea of stars. In the middle of the sea of fire, a handsome young man dressed in purple martial arts attire with a black robe on the outside appeared. He was Lin Feng's eldest disciple Xiao Yan. Behind Xiao Yan was a group of Fun Tianya's legacy disciples. Tang Jun, Lin Tong, Lu Xiaofeng, and the other second-generation disciples were still in Tianhuang mainland. At that moment, most of the people behind Xiaoyan were third-generation legacy disciples, but they were all full of energy. A group of people came before Lin Feng and knelt on the ground. Disciple Xiaoyan greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Although most of them were third-generation legacy disciples, they had also displayed great potential and strength. In this war between the two worlds, the outstanding performance of Xianmen Tianzong's legacy disciples made everyone know that Xianmen Tianzong had successors. The deep foundation of the sect had been completely established from top to bottom. Lin Feng looked at Xiaoyan and said with a smile, "Today, I will give you an honorific title. It will still only be recorded in the internal records of the sect. It will be best if you make a name for yourself outside in the future. I will be happy for you. Xianyan, from today onwards, your Dao title will be an honorific title. You will be known as Dao Master Xianyan." As Lin Feng spoke, he looked up at the starry sky above his head and saw a jade token appear in the starry sky. The words Xianyan were written on the jade token. As Lin Feng stretched out his finger and tapped gently, the words Dao Master appeared below the words Xianyan on the jade token. When put together, it became Dao Master Xianyan. The jade token fell from the sky and arrived in front of Xiaoyan. Xiaoyan received the jade token with both hands, and then kowtowed towards Lin Feng. Disciple thanks Master. Within the Celeritas sword sect camp, Venerable Flowing Light looked at the valiant youth who bowed towards Lin Feng and let out a long sigh, then opened his mouth and said, "In the presence of Dao Master Xianyan, Flowing Light greets you." Behind him, Ancestor Ziyun also took a step forward and solemnly bowed towards Xiaoyan. "Greetings Dao Master Xianyan. Celeritas sword sect Ziyun greets you." The other Yuanying stage cultivators of the Celeritas sword sect also bowed towards Xiaoyan. A beautiful white-clothed woman stood behind Ancestor Ziyun, looking at Xiaoyan with a complicated gaze as he stood up, and returned the greeting towards the group of Yuanying elders. The figure of that stubborn and unyielding youth in Wuzhou City many years ago gradually disappeared without a trace from his mind. What was left in front of him right now was the well-mannered and tall eldest disciple of the sect leader of Xianmen Tianzong, the primordial spirit realm powerhouse, Dao Master Xianyan. Murong Yanran laughed bitterly in her heart, shaking her head forcefully and following behind Ancestor Ziyun said, "Greetings Dao Master Xianyan." At the same time, the Golden Elixir stage and Foundation Establishment stage cultivators of the various powers all bowed towards Xiaoyan and said in unison, "Greetings Dao Master Xianyan." One of the Yuanying stage sword cultivators of the Thunderbolt sword sect suddenly bowed and said, "Greetings Dao Master Xianyan, greetings Emperor Yan." As soon as he said that, the entire place suddenly fell silent. Everyone's gaze fell on the Yuanying stage sword cultivator of the Thunderbolt sword sect. Emperor Yan had been mentioned many years ago during the Xian Annihilation War. However, there were many other titles for Xiaoyan that had been circulated. It was after this war between the two worlds that the cultivators of the other powers in the Divine Land gradually unified the titles that they had for Xiaoyan. Although Xiaoyan, Luo Qinggu and the others did not deliberately publicize it, and were very secretive about the specific details of pacifying the civil strife in Shu Mountain, there were still some news that spread. And in the subsequent counterattack on Infinite Wasteland, as the leading figure, Xiaoyan's might was like that of a fire god descending into the world, leaving a deep impression on everyone. The name of Emperor Yan finally began to shake the world. Apart from Emperor Liang Pan of Zhou, Emperor Qin Shi Yu and Shi Zongtang, who were already emperors in the secular world, no one in the history of the Divine Land would give themselves the title of emperor. They were not emperors. From ancient times until now, there were three most famous people who had given themselves the title of emperor. However, they did not call themselves emperors, but the titles that people at that time or later generations used. One of them was Emperor Kong, the master of the ancient Heavenly Gate. His Taoist title were both Sky Taoist, or sometimes Sky Taoist. He was called Heaven Emperor by later generations, and was used to calling him Emperor Kong. The second was the Thunder Emperor, the teacher of the Purple Cloud Taoist, the founder of the Purple Cloud Taoist. His real title was Taoist Hong Du. Since his attainments in the thunder art were rarely matched, he was respectfully called the Thunder Emperor by the later generations. The third one was the Red Emperor, who was the leader of the 4 ancient heroes of the Taishu Temple, Wen Qiyang. In the era when Wen Qiyang fought against the heavens and earth, countless people called him the Red Emperor because of his powerful strength and great achievements in the country. There were 3 human emperors in the same era as Wen Qiyang: Ru Huang, Chen Huang and Xia Huang. Among them, Chen and Xia Huang were not as powerful as Wen Qiyang, and only Ru Huang could compete with Wen Qiyang. During Ru Huang's era, the two of them fought to a draw twice. After Ru Huang abdicated and became a Buddha, he fought with Wen Qiyang again. He first used the 3 lives karma curse to predict what would happen in the near future. The results were accurate and clear, and Wen Qiyang was ashamed of his inferiority. Later, in the Battle of Magical Powers, the Rushuang used the Buddhist kingdom in the palm to contain Wen Qiyang. However, Wen Qiyang jumped out and pressed down with his palm. The Rushuang used the Mahavirokana palm to block, but he was no match for it. Half of his body was smashed into the creation magic treasure, Mount Meru, by Wen Qiyang. As a result, an 8 feet deep pit was left on the peak of Mount Meru before it completely shattered. People paid more attention to fights of magical powers, and because of this, there were many rumors in the era of Xia Huang, saying, "One emperor dominates 3 emperors." However, Wen Qiyang himself was not interested in the name of the Red Emperor, so it did not spread. After his death, the Taishu Temple downplayed his life, and the name of the Red Emperor was gradually forgotten. When people talked about Wen Qiyang, they also called him Taoist Lord Red Sunday. At this moment, when someone suddenly called out the name of the Yin Emperor that was spread in private, everyone could not help but be stunned. In all fairness, Xiao Yan's current cultivation base was still a distance away from the 3 ancient emperors. However, almost no one at the scene doubted that as long as he did not collapse, Xiao Yan's future would be limitless. After a short silence, a large number of cultivators said in unison, "Greetings, Taoist Lord Xianyan, greetings, Yin Emperor." Lin Feng smiled without saying a word, while Xiaoyan kept the jade pendant, stood up and bowed. "Fellow Taoists, you flatter me." After the bow, he led Fen Tianya and the rest to retreat and landed on a star. On another path of light in the distance, there was a long chanting sound. Endless light shone, and the aura was magnificent. In the light, a scholar in a purple robe appeared. It was Lin Feng's second disciple Zhu Yi. Behind Zhu Yi, there were also Meng Honglu, Yi Xinhui, Su Miaoying, Jiao Qing and the other third-generation core disciples of Qiantian Palace. The second-generation core disciples, Yang Tai, Ying Luozha and the rest, were also still in infinite wilderness vast land. The group of people followed the path of light and arrived before Lin Feng, bowing together. Disciple Zhu Yi greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Lin Feng nodded and smiled. Just like Xianyan, I've bestowed upon you a honorific title today for the sake of the sect. From today onwards, your Dao title will be bestowed upon you as Dao Lord Xianyan. A jade pendant with the words Xianyan appeared in the starry sky. Below the words Dao Lord appeared, and together, they became Dao Lord Xianyan. Zhu Yi took the jade pendant and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks Master. Among the surrounding Great Qin dynasty cultivators, a green-robed scholar was the first to bow to Zhu Yi. Greetings Dao Lord Xianyan, greetings Master Yi. Disciple Jiao Junchen greets you. Everyone sighed. In the war between the 2 worlds that had just ended, other than Kongyuan Yudu, who was personally killed by his master Lin Feng, the highest realm of the demon race that had fallen was the Blue Sky Dragon King, who had died in the hands of Zhu Yi and was only 1 step away from the first tribulation. The group of Essence Spirit Realm experts also said in unison, "Greetings to Dao Lord Xianyan and Master Yi, Emperor of Zhou-Liangpan," and the group of Great Zhou Dynasty cultivators looked at the purple-robed and white-robed scholar, and had mixed feelings. Chapter 1266. Zhu Yi took the jade token and stood up. He also bowed to the surrounding cultivators. "Fellow Taoists, thank you for coming all the way here." After bowing, Zhu Yi led the disciples of the Qiantian Palace away, and landed on a star next to Lin Feng. The third path lit up in the distance. At the end of the path, there was only darkness. It was connected to a dark yellow path, and at the end of the path was a dark stone bridge. Below the stone bridge, a dark yellow river flowed silently. On the other side of the stone bridge stood an enormous pitch-black palace. The palace's door opened, and a young man in purple clothes with a head full of white hair walked out first. He passed through the bridge of helplessness and stepped onto the Yellow Springs Road. Then he walked along the path of light, as if he was the king of hell from the Yellow Springs. When the white-haired young man appeared, the cultivators of the other forces with lower cultivation bases in the void held their breaths. This person was naturally Lin Feng's third disciple, Wang Lin. In this war between the two worlds, the opponent Wang Lin killed was the great sage Zhu Jian, who was at the beginning tribulation stage. Compared to Sword Venerable Firmament, Kuan Dragon King, Jade Sky Dragon King, and Radiant Yudu, who Xiao Yan Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao fought against, the great sage Zhu Jian was the weakest. However, unlike Xiao Yan who had the power of heavenly calamity, Zhu Yi who had the golden Permitha bridge, and Shi Tianhao who had the remains of the Sky City, Wang Lin killed great sage Zhu Jian with his own magical power. His amazing skills were worthy of admiration. Although he had been seriously injured after the battle with great sage Zhu Jian, and had retreated from the battlefield to recuperate in the early stages of the war between the two worlds, Wang Lin's reputation was no weaker than Xiao Yan and the others. And Wang Lin's reputation as the most ruthless and murderous person among Lin Feng's disciples made many people's hearts turn cold. A group of young disciples followed behind Wang Lin. Dao Yuding, Li Xingfei, and the others were nowhere to be seen. They were still in infinite wilderness vast land. The disciples of Mortal Forest residents behind Wang Lin were mainly third-generation disciples. The most eye-catching one was a pale-skinned, seemingly gentle young man. He was Li Xingfei's disciple, Chun Fangge, the top of the third-generation core disciples of Mortal Forest residents. He was one of the best among the third-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. Although he looked gentle and weak, he had already risen to fame during the counterattack against the demon race in the later stages of the war between the two worlds. He had become an outstanding talent of the younger generation. Perfected Yuan Hong's name had already spread, and was known to all the cultivators of the Yuanying and Golden Elixir period in the human cultivation world. The disciples of Mortal Forest residents followed closely behind Wang Lin, and came before Lin Feng and bowed together. Disciple Wang Lin greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Lin Feng smiled and said, Xian and I, today I will give you an honorific title. You will be called Dao Lord Xian and I and be preserved as an internal legacy of the sect. I believe that you can also make a name for yourself outside. A jade pendant engraved with the words Xian and I appeared in the starry sky. Below the words Dao Lord were the words Dao Lord. Together, they became Dao Lord Xian and I. Wang Lin took the jade pendant and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks Master. Among the cultivators who came to watch the ceremony, a middle-aged Taoist with a black beard and a tall crown sighed and said first, the Tao has turned into two extremes, supreme supremacy. Dao Lord Xian and I and Extreme Dao Lord, Luofu greets you. This middle-aged Taoist with a black beard and a tall crown was a top figure among the itinerant cultivators, a Dao integration expert, Dao Lord Luofu. As soon as he said that, everyone present fell silent. There were many titles about Wang Lin in the Divine Land, such as the Lord of the Nether, the Lord of the Yellow Springs, and even the Netherworld Emperor and the Yama King. However, such titles seem to have a deep connection with the King of the Underworld's lineage. The King of the Underworld's lineage was now hated by everyone, and had a bad relationship with Xianmen Tianzong. Wang Lin had personally killed countless cultivators of the Underworld Hall. Wang Lin had an extremely bad impression of the cultivators of the Underworld Hall, and he had no intention of taking over the position of the Underworld Emperor. Therefore, it was fine if such a title was circulated in private, but to say it in front of the people of the celestial sect of Xianmen was tantamount to provocation. As for the more straightforward titles like God of Slaughter and Butcher, there was no need to mention them. However, there was a title that was not widely spread at first, Extreme Dao Lord. As the war between the two realms continued, it gradually spread. After Dao Lord Luofu, the others also said in unison, Dao Lord Xian and I and Extreme Dao Lord we greet you. Wang Lin put away the jade pendant and stood up. He also bowed and said calmly, "Thank you, fellow Taoists, for coming to the ceremony." After saying that, he led Chunfanga and the others to a star. In the distance, the fourth path of light lit up. Figures flickered and walked along the path. The person in the lead had red hair that fluttered like flames. It was Lin Feng's fourth disciple, Yu Hongyan. Seeing Yu Hongyan, the cultivators of the purple cloud path bowed solemnly. In the middle of the war between the two realms, the situation in the Xianhai changed. The experts of the dragon race went out to the sea and suddenly attacked the Qin dynasty. The cultivators of the purple cloud path were caught in the crossfire. Those who were lucky enough to escape were chased by the Fang's Dragon King and other demonic dragons. It was all thanks to Yu Hongyan's timely arrival that they were saved. Then he killed the Fang's Dragon King and avenged the deaths of Gu Lei, Li Kueyin and the others. The people behind Yu Hongyan were naturally the disciples of the Snow Wind Valley. The second-generation core disciples, led by Zhao Huan, were mostly still in the infinite wilderness. Those who were present today were mostly the third-generation core disciples. However, compared to Meng Honglu, Yi Xinhui, Chunfanga, and the others, there was no one particularly famous among the disciples of the Snow Wind Valley. Zhao Huan, the top second-generation core disciple of the Snow Wind Valley, was still lacking compared to Tang Jun, Han Yang, Zhou Yunsong, Yang Tai, and Dao Yuding. Many people shook their heads and sighed. Yu Hongyan was valiant, but it was a pity that there were no outstanding disciples under her, so she was slightly ordinary. Lin Feng could not help but smile when he saw the emotional fluctuations of the crowd. His gaze fell on a tall young man behind Yu Hongyan. The young man was tall, half a head taller than the tallest disciple of the Snow Wind Valley beside him. He was burly, but his expression was calm and his eyes were firm. Even though he didn't participate in the war between the two worlds because he's in seclusion, but gold will always shine. He's currently the person I think most highly of among the third-generation disciples. The corner of Lin Feng's mouth curled up, smiling but not saying anything. The disciples of the Snow Wind Valley followed behind Yu Hongyan, and came before Lin Feng and bowed together. Disciple Yu Hongyan greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Lin Feng gently pointed in the void and a jade token appeared in the air. He continued, Xianlan, I will give you an honorific title, Dao Master Xianlan. It will also be used for the internal inheritance of the sect. On the jade token that was engraved with the two words Xianlan, there were two more words Dao Master below Xianlan. When put together, it became Dao Master Xianlan. Yu Hongyan took the jade token and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks Master Xianlan. Among the audience, Dao Master Lei Yun's deep voice sounded like a thick thundercloud. Dao Master Xianlan Immortal Wu. Lei Yun pays his respects to you. In the ancient times of the Divine Land, there was a period of time when it was popular to call female top Taoist masters, Immortal Lord. Later this custom gradually faded. However, as a sect that had been established since ancient times, the Purple Heaven Path still retained some ancient etiquette. One of the more popular titles for Yu Hongyan in the Divine Land was Immortal Lord Wu. It was first called by the cultivators of the Purple Heaven Path. At that time, Yu Hongyan hadn't reached the primordial soul realm yet. Even now, she had just reached the primordial soul realm, so her cultivation level was not worthy of this title. But at this moment, not only Dao Master Lei Yun, but the other cultivators also said in unison, Dao Master Xianlan, Immortal Wu, we pay our respects to you. No one doubted the strength and potential that Yu Hongyan had shown. As long as she didn't collapse, her achievements today were far from the end. Fellow Taoists, you flatter me. Yu Hongyan put away the jade tablet, stood up, and gracefully bowed to the people around him. Then he led the disciples of Snowgale Valley, and similarly retreated to Lin Feng's side, landing on a star. At this moment, the fifth road was also lit up. But this time, there was only one person standing at the end of the road. Yang Qing walked alone in the light, but her expression was free and peaceful, as if she didn't care about the lack of disciples. No one dared to look down on her, or the Nirvana Grotto Heaven. Yang Qing only had one disciple, and that was Zhou Yunsong, one of the most outstanding second-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. At this moment, he was in the vast land of Tianhuang. In the war between the two worlds, he had killed so many demons that rivers of blood flowed. His ruthlessness was second to none among the second-generation disciples of Xianmen Tianzong. At the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, after Zhou Yunsong became famous, some people had ridiculed Yang Qing for being mediocre and would soon surpass him. It was not uncommon for students to surpass their masters in the divine land. But for the master of the celestial sect, who had many outstanding disciples, Yang Qing's situation was very ironic. But at this moment, no one mentioned this matter again. In the war between the two worlds, in the battle against the king of the underworld, Yang Qing's strength and methods had shocked even a Dao integration expert like Gu Yuankai. Her mystical powers and dermic powers were so powerful that she was the strongest after the four heroes of the celestial sect under Lin Feng, shocking the world. Yang Qing's expression was calm. Regardless of whether it was when people secretly mocked him in the past or now, his emotions did not change. He did not care about the opinions of the outside world at all. Lin Feng's expression was also calm. He smiled as he watched Yang Qing walk in front of him alone. Yang Qing bowed to Lin Feng. Disciple Yang Qing greets master. Lin Feng smiled and said, Xianming, from today onwards, your Dao title will be an honorific title. You will be known as Dao Lord Xianming, and will be kept as the internal inheritance of the sect. A jade pendant with the words Xianming appeared in the starry sky. Below the words Xianming were the words Dao Lord. Put together, it became Dao Lord Xianming. Yang Qing took the jade pendant and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks master. After the king of the underworld was defeated by Lin Feng's sword, the ancient race also joined the tide of counterattacking Infinite Mainland. Later, the clan leader, Gu Jun, and the clan elder, Gu Yuankai, came to Kunlun Mountain to watch the ceremony. Gu Jun looked at Yang Qing with a look of admiration. Gu Yuankai, who was beside him, was the first to speak. In front of Dao Lord Xianming and Dao Lord Yin Yang, I, Gu Yuankai, greet you. Chapter 1267. After Gu Yuankai, the other cultivators said in unison, Greetings, Dao Lord Xianming and Yin Yang Dao Lord. Yang Qing kept the jade pendant and bowed to the crowd. Thank you, everyone. He came here alone along the path. At this moment, he also flew and landed on a star beside Lin Feng. His expression was calm and relaxed, safe and at ease. In another direction, the sixth path lit up in the starry sky. At the end of the path stood a dark-skinned, serious-looking young man in purple. He was Lin Feng's sixth disciple, Li Yuanfang. Behind Li Yuanfang, there was a row of Xianmen Tianzong disciples. They were all successors of He Luoju. Tan Yunqing and the other second-generation legacy disciples were still in Tianhuang vast land. Most of the people here today were third-generation legacy disciples. Among them, the most familiar person to the cultivators of the other forces was a handsome young man in the row. He was obviously a dignified person. He was Tan Yunqing's disciple, the most outstanding person among He Luoju's third-generation legacy disciples, Lin Chuan. His Dao name was Yuan Gang. He went to Tianhuang vast land to participate in the battle. Although his battle results were not dazzling, he had left a deep impression on the spectators. Gu Yinlin's way of doing things was steady, dignified and serious. Although he was still young, he was mature and had a bit of a dignified demeanor. Although he was a disciple of He Luoju, he faintly had the advantages of both He Luoju and Light Dance Pavilion. He used his sword to set up formations. Although his cultivation was only at the early stage of Jindan, he had already revealed a bit of an extraordinary aura. The successors of He Luoju followed behind Li Yuanfang. They lined up neatly in front of Lin Feng and bowed. Disciple Li Yuanfang greets master. Disciple greets ancestral master. Lin Feng smiled and said, Xian Luo, from now on, your Dao name will be the title of Dao Lord Xian Luo. It will be recorded in the sect. A jade plate with the words Xian Luo appeared in the starry sky. Below the words Xian Luo were the words Dao Master. When put together, it became Dao Master Xian Luo. Li Yuanfang took the jade tablet and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks master. When Gu Jun saw this scene, he nodded and said, "The master of the celestial sect of wonders can indeed be said to be full of heroes." Gu Yuankai and the other ancient clan cultivators all nodded slightly. They had also witnessed Li Yuanfang's performance in the battle against the king of the underworld. The Great South Pole Longevity Formation left behind by the ancient emperor was also an extremely powerful top-notch formation. The ancient emperor's lineage had a complete inheritance, and he had great attainments in the Tao of formations. At this moment, an elder in a black robe said silently, "The divine prefecture's formations originate from Heluo. The highest person in the world is the celestial sect of wonders." Tao Lord Xianluo inherited the orthodoxy of the celestial sect of wonders, and can be called Divine Lord Heluo. Lin Feng had used his own dermic powers to create the yin-yang life and death formation, and the sky-punishing sword formation. His attainments in the Tao of formations had been indisputable in the divine land for many years. However, the black-robed elder's words still made everyone's eyes narrow. This was because this person was the reincarnation sect master of the Hell Path, Lord Underworld. The reincarnation sect master of the Hell Path was one of the few sects in the divine land that specialized in formations. The cultivators in the sect even used formations to prove their nascent soul Tao. Before this, because of what happened to Shi Tianfang, Mo Xiulua, Xin Qifeng, and the others, the reincarnation sect and Xianmen Tianzong were not on good terms. At this moment, the reincarnation sect master of the Hell Path, who was also likely to be the next reincarnation sect master, Lord Underworld, spoke at this moment. It was tantamount to admitting that his attainments in the Tao of formations could not be compared to Lin Feng's, let alone Li Yuanfang's. Lord Underworld's expression was neither happy nor angry. Silently he said, "Greetings to Tao Lord Xianluo and Divine Lord Heluo." At this moment, the others also opened their mouths and said in unison, "Greetings to Tao Lord Xianluo and Divine Lord Heluo." Li Yuanfang put away the jade plate engraved with his honorific title, Tao Master Xianluo. He stood up and solemnly returned the salute to the crowd. "Fellow Taoists, you flatter me." Xianluo thanks everyone. As Li Yuanfang and the others also landed on the star, the seventh path of light in the distance lit up. At the end of the path was a tall and handsome young man. His long black hair hung loosely over his shoulders, and he had a smile on his face. Naturally, he was Lin Feng's youngest male disciple, Shi Tianhao. The people behind Shi Tianhao were the disciples of the Heaven-Barren Valley. Among them, the third-generation core disciples were also the main ones. The second-generation core disciples, Huang Zhenting, Zhuge Wanqiu, and the others, were still in the infinite wilderness. Among the third-generation core disciples of the Heaven-Barren Valley, the one who was the most famous was naturally Huang Zhenting's disciple, Shi Yang. During the early stages of the war between the two worlds, Shi Yang had just successfully formed his core. As soon as he formed his golden elixir, the war between the two worlds broke out, and he was brought to the infinite wilderness by his grandmaster, Shi Tianhao, and master, Huang Zhenting. After the fierce battle with the demon race, Shi Yang's reputation rose, and more people began to know and pay attention to him. At this moment, the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty looked at Shi Yang with complicated gazes. This was a distant branch of the royal family. The Shi family, after the brothers Shi Tianhao and Shi Tianyi, had produced a third top genius in just a few decades. Lin Feng looked at this little guy and did not know whether to laugh or cry. He was also a devil incarnate who had perfectly inherited the fine traditions of the desolate Sky Valley. Apart from that, there was an old saying, like teacher, like disciple. Thus, after Heavenly Thunder Immortal Xiao Huang, the Heaven-Barren Valley produced another perfected person Tian. The word Dan had the meaning of the sun rising from the east, like the sun rising from the horizon. It looked good on its own, and it was even more related to Shi Yang's name. However, as a disciple of the third-generation core disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, using this word for his Taoist name was somewhat embarrassing. Such a masterpiece naturally came from his master, the Heavenly Thunder true monarch Huang Zhenting. At the time, it really did give Lin Feng another shock. Yet the two people involved felt extremely good about themselves. Huang Zhenting, who gave the Taoist name, was naturally extremely satisfied, and little Shi Yang, who gave this Taoist name, was also in high spirits. Shi Tianhao brought the people of the Heaven-Barren Valley to Linfeng, smiled, and knelt on the ground. Behind him, Shi Yang and the others also knelt together. Disciple Shi Tianhao greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Linfeng smiled and pointed at the void. Xianhuang, today, I will give you an honorific title, Tao Master Xianhuang, and leave it in the sect's internal records. A jade tablet with the words Xianhuang appeared in the sky, and below it the words Tao Master appeared. Together, they became Tao Master Xianhuang. Shi Tianhao took the jade tablet, and the smile on his face disappeared. He solemnly kowtowed to Linfeng. Disciple thanks Master. In the crowd, the Qin dynasty's King Rosen, Shi Zongmao, sighed softly and said slowly, "Greetings to Tao Master Xianhuang and Heavenly Emperor Xianhuang." As soon as these words came out, everyone fell silent. In the years after Shi Tianhao reached the nascent soul realm, there were two kinds of honorific titles in the divine land. One was Heavenly Emperor Xianhuang, and the other was Heavenly Emperor Xianhuang. The former was mainly spread among the cultivators outside the Qin dynasty and the Zhou dynasty, while the cultivators of the Qin dynasty and the Zhou dynasty called him Heavenly Emperor Xianhuang. This was especially so in the Great Qin dynasty. Most of the time, they would call Shi Tianhao by the title Stonefeather had given him, Desolate Marquis. At this moment, Shi Zongmao called him Heavenly Emperor Xianhuang, which was more meaningful than calling Shaoyan Flame Emperor. Emperor Zhou Liangpan's expression was calm. He, who already had a plan in his heart, didn't mind in this aspect. Before he congratulated Shaoyan, now he also calmly said, "Xianhuang Tao Master, Xianhuang Heaven Emperor, greetings." The rest of the cultivators congratulated him too. Shi Tianhao put away the jade badge, stood up, and smiled again. He bowed to Liangpan, Shi Zongmao, and the others. "Thank you for coming today." After saying this, he led the disciples of the Heaven-Barren Valley to a star beside Linfeng. In the void, 7 paths of light extended in 7 directions, like the orbit of stars. At this moment, the 8th path lit up, and at the end of the path stood a beautiful girl in purple. Sword Lord Tongtian, Sword Lord Thunderbolt, Sword Lord Emerald Wave, Sword Lord Flowing Light, and even Sword Lord Flying Snow, who was a return-to-void stage cultivator in the Qin dynasty, all held their breath. The girl in front of them was, of course, Linfeng's youngest disciple Luo Qinggu. Her master, Linfeng, was the master of the Celestial Gate, and she had created a new branch of the Sword Tao in the world. It was different from the immortal sword Qi of Shushan, and the Great Nine Heavens sword technique of Elysium, but it was not inferior at all. Although Luo Qinggu was young, she was already a grandmaster of the Sword Tao of her generation. Looking at the 7 people standing in Linfeng's divine land, including Shaoyan, all the spectators sighed in their hearts. They have just entered the Essence Soul stage, but they already have the appearance of a grandmaster. They will definitely become giants in the divine land in the future. The people behind Luo Qinggu were the disciples of the Light Dance Pavilion. They were relatively few in number, but each of them had an extraordinary aura. Apart from the sharpness of the Sword Tao, they had already revealed a grand and mysterious aura. Han Yang and the other second-generation true disciples were basically all in the vast land of infinite wilderness. Only Yun Yanfeng, whose Tao name was Tianxian, stayed in the Light Dance Pavilion to help manage the affairs. At this moment, the disciples of the Light Dance Pavilion who came with Luo Qinggu were all third-generation true disciples, except for Yun Yanfeng, the second-generation true disciple. Although they were few in number, they would not be looked down upon. The cultivators of the Yuanying and Golden Elixir period, who had lower cultivation levels from the other major forces, looked at the group of disciples of the Light Dance Pavilion with a slightly serious expression. In this war between the two worlds, among the 8 cave abodes of Xianmen Tianzong, the disciples of the Light Dance Pavilion had displayed the highest average combat level. All of them seemed to have experienced hundreds of battles. While they were determined, they were also flexible and good at adapting to changes. In particular, there was a young disciple of the Light Dance Pavilion following behind Yun Yanfeng. He had a medium build and an extremely ordinary appearance. He even looked a little dull, and there was no spirit in his eyes when he opened and closed. But this seemingly ordinary young man, who seemed to be hard to find in a crowd, was actually the third-generation disciple of Xianmen Tianzong, who had the most glorious results of killing demons in this war between the two worlds. He was Han Yang's disciple Lian Huazhao, Ing Luoz's disciple, perfected Yuan Xingmeng Honglu, Yang Tai's disciple, perfected Yuan Yi Xinhui, Li Xingfei's disciple, perfected Yuan Hongchen Fanga, Huang Jinting's disciple, perfected Yuan Yan Shiyang, and perfected Yuan Du Lian Huazhao, who was following behind Yun Yanfang, were all the outstanding talents of the new generation that emerged from Xianmen Tianzong in this war between the two worlds. Chapter 1268. Yun Yanfang, Lian Huazhao, and the others followed behind Luo Qinggu. They walked along the eighth path of light and arrived before Lin Feng. Luo Qinggu bowed down gracefully, and the disciples of the gentle dance pavilion behind her did the same. Disciple Luo Qinggu greets Master. Disciple greets Ancestral Master. Lin Feng smiled and pointed at the void. Xianche, I will give you an honorific title today. You will be known as Dao Venerate Xianche. It will be recorded in the sect's internal inheritance. A jade tablet with the words Xianche appeared in the starry sky. The words Dao Venerate appeared below the words. When put together, it became Dao Venerate Xianche. Luo Qinggu took the jade tablet and kowtowed to Lin Feng. Disciple thanks Master. When a sword cultivator reached the nascent soul realm, they would usually be given the honorific title of Sword Venerate instead of Dao Venerate. However, Lin Feng and Luo Qinggu had no intention of being special. Sword Venerate Tong Tian sighed softly when he saw this. On the other side, Sword Venerate Thunderbolt said in a clear voice, "Greetings to Dao Venerate Xianche and Sword Immortal Lord." Just like Yu Hongyan's title of Martial Immortal Lord, Luo Qinggu was also called Sword Immortal Lord before her nascent soul realm was formed. However, although many people acknowledged Luo Qinggu's talent and potential, they did not really care much about it. Now, however, they could no longer ignore it. Moreover, the meaning of Sword Immortal Lord was completely different when it came from the mouth of Sword Venerate Thunderbolt, who was at the Dao Integration realm. Sword Venerate Tongtian sighed and said, "Greetings to Dao Venerate Xianche and Sword Immortal Lord." Sword Venerate Flowing Light and the other sword cultivators also congratulated Luo Qinggu. The people from other forces who came to watch the ceremony also congratulated her. In the crowd, a young man in black stood and spoke in unison with the others. Silently, he looked at Luo Qinggu. The people around him were all cultivators of the Yuanying and Golden Elixir period. Although the black-clothed youth did not stand in the first place, the others seemed to regard him as the center of attention. The surrounding forces looked at the black-robed young man and did not underestimate him. Although this young man was the second primordial soul stage cultivator since the founding master of Beyond Heaven Mountain, and he had only just reached the primordial soul stage, his magical powers were enough to attract everyone's attention. The black-clothed young man was naturally Chu Yang. During the internal strife of Mount Shu, he had successfully attained the Essence Soul realm. Later on, during the Divine Land's counterattack on Tianhuang continent, he had shocked everyone with a single feat, displaying power that was far beyond ordinary people's expectations. The name of Chu Yang, the name of Beyond Heaven Mountain, had attracted the attention of the entire Divine Land for the first time. And Beyond Heaven Mountain, which was still closely following in the footsteps of Xianmen Tianzong, had also risen in status among the forces that were completely dependent on Xianmen Tianzong. At this moment, some people gradually recalled that during the Kunlun Mountain Dharma Assembly, Chu Yang had also shocked everyone like a dark horse. However, at that time, he was only a cultivator of the Golden Elixir period. Even though he had outstanding talent and performed well, he was only praised by a group of Essence Soul stage powerhouses. But today he had successfully attained the Essence Soul realm. The strength of his magical powers far surpassed that of ordinary Essence Soul embodiment stage cultivators. Be it status or power, he was able to stand on equal footing with the leaders and elders of many forces. And the sect that he came from Beyond Heaven Mountain, not to mention super forces like Xianmen Tianzong, Taishu Temple, the Great Zhou Dynasty, the Great Qin Dynasty and the Shu Mountain Sword Sect, was far inferior to the Heavenly Sword Sect, the Thunderbolt Sword Sect, and the Purple Cloud Dao. Even the Blaze Sword Sect and the Wilderness Sword Sect were far superior. Many years ago, the founder of Beyond Heaven Mountain passed away not long after he established the sect. Since then, there had been no more Essence Soul Stage powerhouses in Beyond Heaven Mountain. And today, Chu Yang had just attained the Essence Soul Stage. The strength and momentum of Beyond Heaven Mountain had already surpassed its peak in the past. Although in the process of him fighting with the demon race, knowledgeable powerhouses could vaguely recognize that his Dharma foundation did not rely on Beyond Heaven Mountain. He had always considered himself a disciple of Beyond Heaven Mountain. As his strength continued to increase, he gradually gained the ability to protect himself. Many magical powers and techniques also began to continuously integrate into Beyond Heaven Mountain, causing the overall strength of Beyond Heaven Mountain to begin to soar. This also caused Chu Yang's legend to undoubtedly be more intense than that of ordinary people. However, at this moment, in the All-Heaven Hall, his radiance had also become much dimmer. It was as if he was an undetectable speck of starlight in broad daylight. Chu Yang was not dissatisfied with this. Instead, he was very calm. He knew very well that when the news of him possessing the Great Nine Heavens Divine Sword Dao spread, even if the Mount Shu Sword Sect and the Void Temple did not have any ideas, and the Eastern Heaven Gate was powerless after losing Shao Dongtian and the Black Heaven Seal, the Great Zhou Dynasty had the ability to make things difficult for him. Chu Yang knew the relationship between the Greater Nine Heavens Divine Sword Dao and the Great Heavenly Dao. The reason why he was safe and sound now, and the Great Zhou Empire did not cause trouble for him and Beyond Heaven Mountain, completely treating him as if he did not exist, was all because Xianmen Tianzong was standing behind him. Chu Yang seemed to have finally become high profile, but in fact he had always been vigilant. However, even when participating in the war in Infinite Wilderness Vastland, he had always maintained his company with Xianmen Tianzong, and was determined not to be alone. Even if the Great Zhou Empire wanted to attack Xianmen Tianzong, they could not find a good opportunity to do so. At this moment he looked at Luo Qinggu and thought to himself, "Qinggu, congratulations." Luo Qinggu put away the jade token, stood up, and bowed to the crowd. "My fellow Taoists, you're too kind." After saying that, she led her disciples and landed on a star beside Lin Feng. The successors of Xianmen Tianzong's 8 branches stood in 8 directions. The stars beneath their feet became brighter and brighter, turning into pillars of light that shot into the sky. Standing in the middle of the 8 pillars of light, Lin Feng smiled and looked at the surrounding people who came to watch the ceremony. He said, "Fellow Taoists, I thank you for coming from afar to watch the ceremony." The crowd repeatedly said that they did not dare and looked at the 8 people beside Lin Feng, including Xiao Yan. At this moment, the 8 of them gathered together, unlike earlier when they appeared one by one. It was even more shocking. After all, everyone knew that although the 8 people in the lead were all at the primordial spirit incarnation realm, none of them could be measured by common sense. For example, Yu Hongyan, Yang Qing, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu, when they just entered the primordial spirit realm, they were already far superior to other primordial spirit incarnation realm cultivators. In the entire divine land, how many people could easily say that they could win against cultivators at the primordial spirit incarnation realm? As for Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, Wang Lin, and Shi Tianhao, the famous 4 heroes of Xianmen, they used the failures and corpses of powerful opponents to build their illustrious reputation. Sword Venerable Firmament, Jade Sky Dragon King, Great Sage Zhu Jian, Bright Slayer Yudu, and even Ningfeng Yudu, Wanlong Yudu, Luyan Dragon Queen. Any one of them was a top strong practitioner, but now they had all become stepping stones for Xiao Yan and the rest. Excluding Lin Feng himself, the direct disciples of Xianmen were his 8 disciples who had achieved the primordial spirit realm. But even if it was only the 8 of them, if they worked together, how many forces in the human world of the divine land could match them? Today, other than bestowing honorific titles, there is one more thing to do. Lin Feng smiled faintly and looked at Xiao Yan and the rest. "Now that you can be considered to have finished your apprenticeship, I still have some arrangements to share with you." He pointed his finger lightly in the void, and 5 balls of light appeared, emitting a powerful aura. Apart from Gu clan leader Gu Jun, who was in the first tribulation stage, everyone present, including Dao integration stage Liang Pan, Shi Zhongmao, Dao Lord Luofu, Gu Yuankai, Sword Venerable Tong Tian, and Bei Rong First Chanyu, narrowed their eyes slightly. As the light dissipated, what appeared in front of everyone was shockingly the 2 Mahayana grade artifacts, the Sala Wondrous Tree and the 2 Poles Sky Peak, as well as the Transmogrification grade artifact, the Dragon God Heavenly Armor, and another Spirit Nurturing grade Heavy Armor artifact. It was the ancestral Crocodile Divine Armor that Lin Feng had just forged. The last item was a sword light that was as vast as smoke in clouds. It was a long sword that surged like a river. As the sword light flowed, it was as if it was looking down on everything in the world from the sky. It was also like the reflection of everything in the world in the sky. Sword Venerable Tong Tian cried out involuntarily. Ancient sword Tai Ching? That sword was the ancient sword Tai Ching, which was on par with the ancient sword Heavenly Dipper and the ancient sword Firmament in the Mount Shu Sword Sex collection. But what shocked Sword Venerable Tong Tian and the others who knew the inside story was that the ancient sword Tai Ching had always belonged to the Taishu Temple, and the Mount Shu Sword sect had coveted it for many years, but they had never been able to get it. Everyone looked at the ancient sword Tai Ching, which was on par with the wondrous Sala Tree and the 2 extreme Sky Peak, in shock. Lin Feng did not explain much, but looked at the Dharma treasure in front of him. The figures of the immortal Sala Tree and the 2 extreme Sky Peak appeared at the same time, and a woman also appeared beside the ancient sword Tai Ching. Her eyes were misty, but she was the Dharma treasure origin spirit of the ancient sword Tai Ching. There are 5 of you here, and there will be 3 more coming later. Slowly Lin Feng said, I would like to invite everyone to guard my disciple. It does not belong to them individually, but to guard the legacy of the cave abode. This is the blessing of my disciple, and to everyone, it is also a bright path for you to move forward in the future. You can cultivate together with my disciple. As he spoke, his gaze fell on the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. The scales on the armor kept opening and closing, and the entire armor kept vibrating. Lin Feng said to Xiao Yan, Xianyan, this treasure will belong to your Fun Tianya. The surrounding people who were watching the ceremony were slightly moved. The Dragon God Heavenly Armor, formerly known as the Flame Dragon Heavenly Armor, was also considered famous now. It had become Xiao Yan's disciple, but it seemed to have a different meaning. This was the earliest artifact that Xianmen Tianzong was known to the people. It was also rumored that it was personally refined by Lin Feng, and since then, it had been moving together with Lin Feng's God of War clone. However, although the artifact was extraordinary, it was still a transformation-grade artifact after all. It could not be compared to the ancient sword Tai Ching, the wondrous Sala Tree, and the twin Sky Peaks. He gave this artifact to Xiao Yan, isn't it a little? Just as some people were having such thoughts, they saw Lin Feng suddenly reaching out his hand and patting the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. In the next moment, a majestic man with a majestic figure appeared on the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. On his exposed skin, faint dragon scales could be seen. It was the light figure of the Dragon God Heavenly Armor's primordial spirit. Immediately after, the light figure of the man suddenly became dazzling, radiating resplendent light that illuminated the surrounding void. Majestic and mysterious magic power spread in all directions, and the laws of heaven and earth gradually connected with the Dragon God Heavenly Armor. Through the body of the artifact, it was guided to the artifact's primordial spirit. Under the shocked gazes of the crowd, the light figure of the majestic man seemed to solidify. When his eyes opened and closed, it was like a powerful life that was independent of heaven and earth. Everyone gasped at the same time. A Mahayana grade artifact. Although there was a rumor during the exterminating Xian War that the Xian Gate sect master could instantly upgrade a transformation grade artifact to Mahayana grade, everyone was still shocked when they saw it with their own eyes. Looking at the Dragon God Heavenly Armor, and then at Lin Feng who was acting as if nothing had happened, everyone was a little dazed. Chapter 1269. Looking at Lin Feng and the Dragon God Heavenly Armor that had been upgraded from a transformation grade artifact to to a Mahayana-grade artifact in an instant. The big shots of the other forces all gasped. Gu Jun, the leader of the Gu clan, turned to look at the people beside him. One was a girl in green, and the other was a middle-aged man. They were Xiao Zhen and Gu Peng, who had personally experienced the Xian-destroying battle. Xiao Zhen and Gu Peng were also shocked to see the dragon god heavenly armor. When they saw Gu Jun looking at them, they immediately knew what he wanted. The two nodded. The Xiantian god sealing flag was the same. As they spoke, Xiao Zhen and Gu Peng shook their heads in admiration. Even though it was the second time they saw it, they still felt that it was amazing. Or it should be said that it was the second time they saw it, and it proved that the first time was not a coincidence. That was why they were even more amazed. Previously, the Xiantian god sealing flag had been upgraded from the transformation grade to the Mahayana grade, because it was at the peak of the transformation grade, and had reached the critical point. At that time, it just happened to break through that layer of window paper, and thus improved further. But now that the dragon god heavenly armor was in the same situation, it was difficult to explain it with a similar point of view. On the other side, Sword Venerable Flowing Light, who had also personally ascended Yujing Mountain to participate in the Xian-destroying battle, and witnessed the scene of Lin Feng returning to the mountain, had the same expression. And the people around him subconsciously looked at him. Seeing Sword Venerable Flowing Light's sincere admiration, they already knew the answer without asking or waiting for Sword Venerable Flowing Light's answer. So for a moment, everyone was silent. Lin Feng patted the shoulder of the dragon god heavenly armor artifact spirit. The artifact spirit, which looked exactly like a real person, turned into light again and merged with the artifact itself. Then, it turned into a stream of light, and fell into the light pillar that enveloped Xiao Yan and the others. Silently, it floated above the heads of the Fenshan Cliff disciples behind Xiao Yan. Duan Muhong and the other disciples of Fun Tianya bowed solemnly to the dragon divine heavenly armor above their heads. Xiao Yan looked at the dragon divine heavenly armor, and nodded to show his respect. He smiled and said, "Old friend, we are working together again. If anything happens in the future, please take care of my disciples." The dragon god heavenly armor's predecessor was the flame dragon heavenly armor. It was the first artifact that Lin Feng had personally refined. He had lent it to his disciples when needed. Xiao Yan was the first disciple under Lin Feng to use the flame dragon heavenly armor. Although the present was different from the past, Xiao Yan still had feelings for the dragon god heavenly armor. As the scales on Long Shintian's armor opened and closed, the draconic aura spread out in waves. A voice came from within. "It's been a long time, old friend. If your sect needs it, I will do my best." Lin Feng looked at the bipolar sky peak and said, "Peak, from today onwards, you don't have to stay in Xiantian realm. Return to Yujing Mountain and join my disciple Xianming's Nirvana Cave lineage. Are you willing?" Yang Qing's disciples were indeed few now, but it didn't mean that it would be the same in the future. Ever since the bipolar sky peak returned to Xianmen Tianzong, he had been diligent. During the Xiantian eradication war, he had even given his all to fight against Shushan, and cut off the falling rocks. The bipolar sky peak, who was severely injured after the war, was healed by Lin Feng and Xiao Yan. His old injuries were healed and his strength increased. Before and during the war between the two worlds, he had been guarding Xiantian realm. The bipolar sky peak's power was the two extremes of ice and fire. After cultivating in Xianmen Tianzong for so many years, it gradually improved. Lin Feng had already pointed out a path for him. In the future, with Yang Qing's Taiyin True Water and Taiyin True Fire, there was hope for him to turn the two extremes of ice and fire into the two extremes of yin and yang. The bipolar sky peak nodded and merged with his body. The tall ice crystal volcano shone brightly and landed behind Yang Qing. Yang Qing turned around and nodded respectfully to the bipolar sky peak. "Mr. Bipolar Sky Peak, thank you." A voice came from the bipolar sky peak. "Dao Lord Yin Yang, you don't have to be so courteous. It's my turn to trouble you in the future." Lin Feng then said to Shaluoxian, "Shaluoxian, join my disciple Xianlan sect's Snowy Wind Valley lineage." Shaluoxian nodded, and did not say anything else. His body merged with the wondrous Shaluo tree, and landed on the heads of the disciples of Snowy Wind Valley behind Yu Hongyan. The disciples of Snowy Wind Valley bowed respectfully to the wondrous Shaluo tree. Yu Hongyan even turned around and bowed to the wondrous Shaluo tree. Not only was this treasure personally refined by Lin Feng, but it was also one of Lin Feng's clones in the past. At the same time, this Dharma treasure could be said to be the strongest Mahayana Dharma treasure in Xianmen Tianzong. In particular, its defensive power could even withstand the attacks of a large number of experts in the first tribulation stage. After settling down the wondrous Shaluo tree, Lin Feng's gaze fell on Gujian Taiqing. He said calmly, "You can join my disciple Xuanqi's light dance pavilion lineage. While protecting my disciples, you can also study our sword Dao. In this way, you will have a chance to improve even more than you did in Taishu and Shushan." Gujian Taiqing's sword spirit fell silent. Her aura was still a little weak at the moment. On the eve of the war between the two worlds, Yin Yuanjin had helped her resist Lin Feng's might. In the end, both of them were almost cut in half by Lin Feng's ruthless heaven-punishing sword. Yin Yuanjin had been thrown into the Xian Sea by Lin Feng, and Gujian Taiqing had been confiscated. However, Lin Feng did not make things too difficult for her. Instead, during the later stages of the war between the two worlds, when the human cultivation world counterattacked Infinite Wasteland, Lin Feng had stayed in the Divine Land to help her recover from her injuries. In the process, he had naturally subdued her and polished off her sharp edges. Due to the battle between Immortal Heaven and Heaven-Punishing Sword, although Gujian Taiqing belonged to Taishu Temple, he also felt innately repulsed by Lin Feng. However, he was more afraid of him. Although Lin Feng was not a sword cultivator, he was enough to put all sword cultivators in the world to shame. At this moment he did not have the heaven-punishing sword in hand. With just his sword Dao cultivation he could look down on the world. He fully deserved to be the #1 person in the sword Dao in the Divine Land. Even if sword ancestor Ren Changmei was resurrected, he would not be a match for him. The sword that Luo Qingwu cultivated was not Lin Feng's heaven-punishing sword Qi. After a moment of silence, Gujian Taiqing landed on the heads of Yin Yanfeng, Lian Huazhao, and the others behind Luo Qingwu. The group of Light Dance Pavilion disciples did not look down on him because he was new. They all bowed solemnly to Gujian Taiqing. Luo Qingwu also turned her head and nodded slightly. "Thank you for your trouble in the future, senior." Gujian Taiqing vibrated slightly and let out a clear sword chime. When the others saw this scene, they could not help but have countless guesses in their hearts. Tongtian Sword Venerable, Thunderous Sword Venerable, and the others looked at each other and shook their heads. They were not sure what Taishu Temple would think, but when the people of Shu Mountain saw this scene, they would probably have extremely complicated feelings. At this moment, there was a sudden flash of light in the void. Lin Feng clapped his hands lightly, and 3 streams of light descended from the sky. 2 of the streams of light emitted powerful waves of mana. They were 2 Mahayana-level magic treasures, Songtian Dao Jian and Xiantian Seal. These 2 top magic treasures had entered Xianmen Tianzong, and the whole world knew about them. At this moment, it was another magic treasure at the peak of the transformation level that attracted the attention of others. It was a precious jade shaped like rolling white clouds gathered together, and its mana was vast and profound. It was the central heavenly jade, which was one of the 9 treasures of the ancient heavenly gate, along with Songtian Dao Jian and Xiantian Seal in the past. It was the first of the 9 treasures of the ancient heavenly gate. In the ancient times, it suffered a catastrophe and fell from the peak of the Mahayana level to the transformation level, but it was still an extremely powerful magic treasure. But what Liang Pan Gujun, Shizong Mao, Tongtian Sword Venerable, and the others were concerned about was that this magic treasure had previously belonged to Taishu Temple. But looking at the scene in front of them, it was clear that Songtian Dao Jian and Xiantian Seal had brought the heavenly jade back from Taishu Temple together. The various signs and the information contained in them were too rich, and everyone present could not help but feel turbulent. When Lin Feng saw these 3 magic treasures, he smiled slightly and raised his finger to shoot out a ray of mana, which turned into purple gas and fell on the heavenly jade. The heavenly jade seemed to be prepared and did not resist, allowing Lin Feng to refine it. For so many years, Although you have not been able to return to the Mahayana level, you have stayed at the peak of void return for a long time. The old troubles have been eliminated, and the accumulation is vigorous. You are only half a step away. Lin Feng said lightly, "Today I will send you through this half a step. In the future, you can join my disciple Xian Huang in the desolate Sky Valley." Jian Songtian and Yin Xiantian should have told you that the remains of the Sky City and the Azure Heaven Array are now in the hands of my disciple Xian Huang. When you were in the Heavenly Gate, you usually suppressed the Array Eye of the Azure Heaven Array. Now that you have re-entered it to cultivate, it will help the recovery of the Sky City and your own cultivation. As the Heavenly Jade vibrated, it really broke through the last half step that had been blocked and successfully reached the Mahayana level. This was because his own cultivation had been enough, and only one last obstacle was left. Lin Feng could directly help him to advance without using the system reward. "Thank you, Xian Gate Master. I will do my best." The gratitude of the Heavenly Jade was not only because Lin Feng helped him to return to the Mahayana level. The deeper meaning of it could only be understood by a few people, such as Lin Feng and his disciples. After the Heavenly Jade, the Zongtian Daojian and the Xiantian seal also belonged to Zhu Yi's Qiantian Palace, and Li Yuanfang's He Luoju. Lin Feng looked at Wang Lin and said with a smile, "The Xiantian God sealing flag is a personal magic treasure that I gave to you. But now it belongs to your Fan Lin Ju, and this ancestral crocodile divine armor is for your own use. Your great demon-carrying Sky Xianxin clone was in seclusion before, and it will not be long before it comes out, right? This magic treasure is just right for you." Everyone looked at the ancestral crocodile divine armor, which was only a spirit-breeding grade magic treasure, and their hearts couldn't help but tremble. Could it be? As they were thinking, they saw Lin Feng's palm hit the ancestral crocodile divine armor. The power of the ancestral crocodile divine armor, and the aura of the magic treasure's primordial spirit began to change dramatically. Spirit breeding to transformation. Transformation to Mahayana. Everything happened in an instant. The advancement of a spirit-nurturing stage treasure to the incarnation stage, or the advancement of an incarnation stage treasure to the Mahayana stage, was already enough to make everyone feel as if the world had been turned upside down. Now that a spirit-nurturing stage treasure had been instantly elevated to the Mahayana stage, everyone fell into a slight daze. When everyone came to their senses, they looked at the dragon divine heavenly armor, the Zongtian Daojian, the Xiantian God sealing flag, the Shura Wonder Tree, the bipolar sky peak, the Xiantian seal, the heavenly jade and the ancient sword Gran Qing hovering in the void behind Xiaoyan, and the ancestral crocodile divine armor. A total of 8 Mahayana grade magic treasures already exceeded the number of Mahayana grade magic treasures owned by any force in the divine land, including the Taishu Temple. The Mahayana grade magic treasures belonging to Xianmen Tianzong were at least the Shura saber that Lin Feng had confiscated years ago, and the ancestral crocodile divine armor that had just been given to Wang Lin. Just these 10 Mahayana grade magic treasures were equivalent to 10 Dao integration stage powerhouses. Chapter 1270. Among the human cultivation forces in the Great Heaven Primordial World, the Taishu Temple had the most Mahayana grade Dharma treasures. It currently had 5 Mahayana grade Dharma treasures: the Supreme Array Breaking Drum, the Void Yin-Yang Bell, the Heaven and Earth Cage, the Sun and Moon Divine Cauldron, and the Ancient Sword Taiqing. Now that the Ancient Sword Taiqing had fallen into Xianmen Tianzong's hands, the Taishu Temple only had 4 Dharma treasures left. Liang Pan's expression did not change. Gu Jun looked at the Dragon God heavenly armor and the other Dharma treasures with interest. Shi Zongmao lowered his head and pondered. Beirong First Chanyu, Dao Master Thundercloud, Sword Master Tongtian, Sword Master Thunderbolt, and the others were also in a daze. Xianmen Tianzong's powerful strength shocked the divine land once again. Even without disciples, the Mahayana grade Dharma treasures belonging to the Taoist sect were enough to flatten most of the forces in the divine land. Not to mention that everyone present already knew that Lin Feng had tamed the White Tiger Great Sage, who was at the beginning of his tribulation, and was only one step away from completing his tribulation, as well as the Lu Yuan Great Sage, who was at the realm of star and soul unification. Xianmen Tianzong also had a top expert at the Dao integration realm, Zhuge Zhan, among his foreign protectors. The current Xianmen Tianzong could really be said to be flourishing with leaves and a big tree with deep roots. Lin Feng smiled and said, "I'm very grateful that all of you have come from afar to attend the ceremony today." Beside him, Xiao Yan and the others commanded their respective sect's disciples and bowed towards the big shots of the other powers who were watching the ceremony. Everyone came to their senses and said that they did not dare to do so. At the same time, they bowed to Lin Feng and his disciple. From the time when Lin Feng blessed the disciples with honorific titles, to the time when the 8 magic treasures entered the 8 cave residences, everything was projected by the light and shadow of mana, appearing in the eyes of the whole world. Lin Feng's voice echoed in the vast land of the divine continent. Even those who were not present could understand what had happened. At this moment, the entire divine land had a clearer understanding of the strength of the celestial sect of Xianmen. As for Lin Feng, who had turned the tide in the war between the two worlds and suppressed everyone with his sword, his figure was gradually becoming blurry. It wasn't that he was being ignored, but that he was becoming more and more like a lofty mountain, causing people to feel reverence in their hearts. On Xianmen Tianzong's land, in the eyes of the residents of the Kunlun Mountain and the Xiantian realm, Xianmen Tianzong was like a god at this moment, and no one dared to say anything blasphemous. When people talked to each other, even when they mentioned him, the speaker and the listeners would show reverence and longing for him, as if they were on a pilgrimage. And at this moment, within the Xiangate Sky sect, on the peak of the clouds, no matter if it was the new disciples who had just passed the opening ceremony and entered the sect, or the foundation disciples who had already entered the sect before, their hearts were surging with adoration, feeling honored, wishing that they could also stand behind Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi and the rest. One by one, the disciples who had laid the foundation stood up from their seats and then knelt on the ground, kowtowing to Lin Feng and his disciples who appeared in the light and shadow illusion. Seeing this, the new disciples also involuntarily knelt on the ground. In the hall on the top of the cloud peak, there was a series of steady or immature chanting, "Ancestral Master." While the process of this opening ceremony shocked the world, it also vaguely established Xianmen Tianzong's position as the new leader of the divine land. Attending the ceremony was only the last step. Before the opening ceremony, the leaders of the other forces had already come to visit and met with Lin Feng, Xiao Yan and the others. The contents of the individual meetings between each force and Xianmen Tianzong were not known to the outside world other than the parties involved. But after the opening ceremony ended, with the passage of time, everyone could gradually see that the powers that were originally close to the celestial sect of wonders were now getting closer and closer, and the powers that were originally estranged were gradually getting closer to the celestial sect of wonders. What made Emperor Liangpan of Zhou and the Great Zhou dynasty feel the most was that the Songhai sword sect, which had always followed the Great Zhou dynasty's lead, began to become more and more ambiguous. Within the reincarnation sect, the faction led by the Heldao's sect master, the Dark Lord, began to have more and more supporters, and gradually began to completely suppress the other experts in the reincarnation sect who wanted to become the sect master. After Mo Xiaoluo's death, the reincarnation sect's internal strife gradually disappeared, and it became stable again. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell at a glance that the reincarnation sect's gradually changing direction was completely because the Dark Lord had obtained the support of Xianmen Tianzong. Even if Xianmen Tianzong did not make any substantial moves, just by showing his inclination, it was already enough to make the neutral faction, and some of the less determined people in the reincarnation sect change their minds. The war between the two worlds had just ended. The Taishu Temple and Shu Mountain were all sealed. The Qin dynasty was weak, the Great Zhou dynasty was silent, and Xianmen Tianzong's prestige in the divine land reached its peak since the founding of the sect with the momentum of a great victory. However, from Lin Feng onwards, Xianmen Tianzong did not make any major moves, nor did they have the intention of dominating the world or commanding the heroes. However, with the current prestige of Lin Feng and Xianmen Tianzong, they faintly revealed a domineering aura amidst their low profile and peacefulness. This domineering aura was not because they were overbearing, But because no matter what others did, they had to first consider Xianmen Tianzong's and Lin Feng's views on the matter, as well as the possible influence it could bring. After the opening ceremony, Lin Feng himself still stayed on Mount Yujing in the Kunlun mountain range. Mount Yujing was hidden in the empty space, and it was difficult for others to see it. As for Xiao Yan, Zhu Yi, and the others, after making simple arrangements for teaching the new disciples, most of them left the mountain. Many years ago, Lin Feng had once said that they were allowed to open up their own residences to manage. However, a good abode was hard to find. Xiao Yan and the others had been raised by Mount Yujing, and they did not look at ordinary abodes at all. As long as others did not provoke Xianmen Tianzong, they would not make things difficult for the original owner. Thus they kept delaying. In the war between the two realms this time, the human race gained a great victory. They obtained many abodes in the vast land of infinite wasteland, and even occupied many medium-class worlds and foreign spaces that were rich in natural resources and spiritual qi. Among them, as the leader in the later stages of the war, Xianmen Tianzong naturally gained the most. In the newly occupied territories, there were abodes that suited Xiao Yan and the others. Many of these abodes had been occupied by the demon race, and the spiritual qi and natural resources had been lost. However, because they were occupied by the demon race, the spiritual qi pulsation was different from the abodes operated by human cultivators. After some of the abodes were transformed, the spiritual qi pulsation changed, and some natural resources were reborn or even resurrected. Instead, they turned into a paradise for the human race. And this kind of abode made Xiao Yan and the others feel satisfied. For example, Wang Lin, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu each occupied a medium-class world. The medium-class world occupied by Wang Lin, after his own re-improvement and regulation, finally turned into a rich world, named the Against the Immortal Realm. The spiritual qi pulsation was not only different from that when the demon race occupied it, but also different from the situation when ordinary human cultivators built abodes and cultivated medium-class worlds. There was a special meaning in it, which made every visitor feel that it was an eye-opener. And the medium-class world occupied by Li Yuanfang was named the Helua Realm by Li Yuanfang. A large number of precious materials were used as formation treasures to constantly replenish and adjust, and an unprecedentedly powerful Helu, a heavenly gate formation, enveloped this medium-class world. The other newly built villas also invited Li Yuanfang to help with the detailed arrangement of the formation, and Li Yuanfang did his best, meticulously. The medium-class world occupied by Luo Qinggu, after being improved, was named the Pure Yin Sword Realm. The road to the void led the cold and dark water in the Yinyang Sea on Mount Yujing to turn it into a lake. With the lake as the center, streams of cold sword qi rose, which made people feel awe-inspiring. But outside the lake, the entire Pure Yin Sword Realm was full of vitality and flourishing, forming a unique balance with the Blackwater Lake in the center of the medium-class world. Apart from Wang Lin, Li Yuanfang, and Luo Qinggu, the villas of Xiao Yan and Shi Tianhao were all placed on the Infinite Wasteland. The location of Shi Tianhao's Infinite Wasteland manor didn't change. He was very satisfied with his manor, but he had expanded the territory of the manor by a lot. He had taken over a large area of the Infinite Wasteland continent, and brought it into the territory of his manor. Most of the demons and spirit beasts raised in the desolate Sky Valley on Mount Yujing were moved to the Infinite Wasteland Villa. Although it was not as rich in spirit qi as on Mount Yujing, the spirit qi pulsation in the Infinite Wasteland was undoubtedly more suitable for the demons to cultivate. At the same time, the task of expanding the Infinite Wasteland Villa and patrolling was handed over by Shi Tianhao to King Feilian and other demons. The location of the villa chosen by Xiao Yan was the most overbearing and bold. It was almost at the current ceasefire line between the humans and the demons, as if it was guarding the border, which made the demons on the opposite side gnash their teeth in hatred. That spirit mountain was boldly and decisively transformed by Xiao Yan using his great magic power, forcefully chopping it into a mountain city. After learning of this, Lin Feng laughed and sent his Brontosaurus doppelganger to the Infinite Wasteland to write the 3 words, Emperor Yan's City, on a cliff on the side of the mountain city. Among the other disciples of Lin Feng, Yangqing's Nirvana Grotto Heaven lineage was sparsely populated. He had no intention of establishing a villa, and preferred to travel around the world in search of elixirs and practice medicine to save the world. Zhu Yi and Yu Hongyan both chose the location of their cave residences in the Divine Land. The place Yu Hongyan chose was not a very beautiful place, but it was within everyone's expectations. The place she chose was her own ancient country. The territory of the Snow Gale country was still occupied by the Great Zhou dynasty. However, Yu Hongyan brought her disciples from the Snow Gale Valley down Mount Yujing, and set foot on the Snow Gale county of the Great Zhou dynasty. After the war between the two worlds, it was only now that Xianmen Tianzong finally showed some domineering intent. However, the human cultivators in the Divine Land were not surprised at all. In their minds, this day should have come long ago. As Yu Hongyan moved, Zhu Yi also went down the mountain. Zhu Yi had no intention of establishing a separate villa. Instead, he began to officially promote his Mirror Lake Academy to the whole world. And his first choice for promotion was the capital of the Great Zhou dynasty, Tianjing City. For a moment, the whole world was watching. Chapter 1271. It had been many years since Zhu Yi's Mirror Lake Academy had been established. In the past few days, there had been a continuous stream of people entering the academy to seek knowledge. Among them, there was no lack of successful students who left the academy and returned to their hometowns to apply what they had learned. There were always ways for the outside world to obtain knowledge, especially practical techniques, through various channels. When Zhu Yi founded Mirror Lake Academy, his original intention was to benefit the world. The more knowledge spread, the happier he would be. Thus, he did not mind the knowledge of the academy being known by the outside world. Moreover, the most advanced and cutting-edge things would always be in Mirror Lake Academy. It was not because they were hidden, but because the people who studied all kinds of knowledge in the academy were always working hard to bring forth new ideas and walk at the forefront. Today, the reputation of Zhu Yi, Mirror Lake Academy, and Xianmen Tianzong continued to expand in the secular world, and their influence became more and more profound. The Great Qin dynasty, the Great Zhou dynasty, and the Northern Militant Royal Court all controlled the secular world. They naturally noticed the changes that Mirror Lake Academy brought to the world, and they also noticed that Xianmen Tianzong's influence was constantly increasing. Although it was not as strong and fanatical as the Buddhist and Taoist sects' incense offerings, it silently permeated into every corner of the secular world, bit by bit. At the moment, it was still too short, and the effects were not obvious. However, if it continued like this, it would eventually become like water and air, making it difficult for people to escape. This point could be seen by people with insight, but for cultivators, it was difficult to predict what kind of changes would occur after a long time. After the Xian exterminating war, Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple stood side by side, dominating the Divine Land. Its powerful strength ensured that the Great Zhou dynasty and other powers would not go against Xianmen Tianzong for this matter. Even if they allowed others to imitate and spy on them, they could not stop the reputation of Mirror Lake Academy from gradually spreading throughout the world. However, what made the Great Zhou dynasty uneasy was that when Zhu Yi promoted Mirror Lake Academy, he did not choose the Great Qin dynasty, which was gradually leaning toward Xianmen Tianzong, nor did he choose the Northern Militant Royal Court. Instead, he chose the Great Zhou dynasty. Although Zhu Yi was originally from the Great Zhou dynasty, and still had the name of the Great Zhou dynasty on him, everyone knew that the relationship between him and the celestial sect of wonders behind him and the Great Zhou dynasty was not harmonious. Zhu Yi's fellow disciple, Yu Hongyan, had already arrived at the Snowgale country, now the Great Zhou dynasty's Snowgale county. Much to everyone's surprise, the Great Zhou dynasty showed no signs of backing down in Snowgale County. Liang Jingcheng, the Great Zhou dynasty's Dark Cloud King, headed for Snowgale County with a Mahayana-grade warship. After the war, the Divine Land of Peace was once again in the Divine Land. Zhu Yi's arrival in Tianjing City made the atmosphere even more tense. Although the situation in Snowgale County was on the verge of exploding, Tianjing City was still temporarily peaceful. Zhu Yi relied on his manor outside Tianjing City and transformed it into an academy. This academy changed the model of Mirror Lake Academy, and became the first stop of Mirror Lake Academy's promotion. The Great Zhou dynasty remained silent and did not stop this move. However, everyone knew that this was just the beginning. As expected, Zhu Yi's fellow disciple, Shi Tianhao, returned from Infinite Wilderness Continent and set foot on the Great Zhou dynasty's territory with the Great Qin dynasty's new emperor Shi Zongtang and some Great Qin cultivators. During the war between the two worlds, Liang Pan had used the Grand Imperial Palace to forcefully seize the Great Qin dynasty's dragon vein energy. The Great Qin dynasty had never forgotten this. If they had only directed the dragon vein energy to White Cloud Mountain, the Great Qin dynasty could only swallow this grievance. However, when White Cloud Mountain was destroyed and the power rebounded, the Great Zhou dynasty directed most of the power to the Great Qin dynasty's West Hill City. This was something that the Great Qin dynasty could not accept. If no one had come to help, West Hill City would have been in ruins. Shi Zongtang and most of the Great Qin dynasty's higher-ups would have died. After this battle, the Great Qin dynasty finally chose to completely side with Xianmen Tianzong. Now that the war between the two worlds had ended, the Great Qin dynasty's new emperor Shi Zongtang immediately went to the Great Zhou dynasty. The Great Qin dynasty's power had fallen to the bottom, and naturally could not settle the score with the Great Zhou dynasty alone. However, with Xianmen Tianzong's support, the situation was completely different. Immediately after, Zhu Yi spoke at the academy outside Tianjing City, criticizing Zhu Hongwu's Confucianism. Wave after wave of criticism swept towards the Great Zhou dynasty. As the Great Zhou dynasty's grand tutor, Zhu Hongwu was also a great Confucian scholar and a leading figure. Being criticized by Zhu Yi was a huge blow to his prestige. For other cultivators, this was something unimportant. However, for Zhu Hongwu, it was something that he had to pay attention to. When Shi Tianhao, Shi Zongtang, and the others arrived outside Tianjing City, on Kunlun Mountain Range's Jade Capital Mountain, Lin Feng finally spoke. Although he did not leave the mountain, Lin Feng's voice resounded through the world. During the war between the two worlds, the people of the Divine Land should have worked together to resist the invasion of the demon race. However, the Great Zhou dynasty secretly schemed against West Hill City and wanted to kill the Great Qin dynasty. This is a matter of pain to our loved ones and joy to our enemies. It is the shame of the Divine Land. The Great Zhou dynasty completely denied this and accused Xianmen Tianzong of bullying the weak and wanting to punish them. Unfortunately, most of the other forces in the human cultivation world in the vast land of the Divine Prefecture supported the heavenly sects of Xianmen and the Great Qin dynasty. A few forces also remained silent, as if the matter had nothing to do with them, and were quietly watching from the sidelines. Even the Songhai sword sect, which was nominally under the rule of the Great Zhou dynasty, and the rogue cultivators on the East Sea did not have the slightest intention to support the Great Zhou dynasty. Taishu Temple and Mount Shu sword sect sealed their mountains. The entire Divine Land and the Great Zhou dynasty seemed to have fallen into a situation where the entire world seemed to be their enemy. When the Great Zhou dynasty was expanding, its methods were cruel and ruthless. When it annexed the surrounding small countries, it often carried out massacres when it encountered strong resistance. At this time it was settled once again. After Lin Feng spoke, Yu Hongyan first launched an attack on the homeland of Snowgale Country, expelling the cultivators and administrative officials of the Great Zhou dynasty who were guarding there. The Great Zhou dynasty's Yuan King, Liang Jingcheng, and the Mahayana-level magical treasure, the border opening ship, were suppressed by the miraculous Shaluo tree at the foot of Mist Mountain. The situation became tense in an instant. In the sky above Tianjing City, a majestic and domineering palace floated. Purple gold light dragons gathered from all directions towards the huge palace that seemed to be the ruler of the immortal emperor. The chi of dragon veins of the vast territory of the Great Zhou dynasty continuously shrouded Tianjing City. That was the creation magical treasure, the Grand Imperial Palace. The Grand Imperial Palace, which had finally recovered from its damage and regained its former great power and prestige, now looked even more like a monarch descending upon the world with the support of the chi of dragon veins of the Divine Land. In Tianjing City, pillars of light also lit up, forming a huge spirit design that enveloped the entire city. There were small spirit designs operating on the city walls, towers, and other buildings in the city. Together, they supported the protective spirit design of the entire Tianjing city, forming a seamless whole. The combination of the Grand Imperial Palace and the Tianjing City Great Formation attracted the qi of dragon veins. If they fought here, even Zhu Yi, who had the Permi-Thaw Bridge with him, would not be able to match them. Although Shi Tianhao had also arrived here, he saw waves of Dharma power shooting into the sky from Tianjing City, forming another formation. As the formation operated, the violent and vast power further strengthened the power of the Grand Imperial Palace and Tianjing City, making it even more terrifying. Whether it was Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao, or Shi Zongtang, they were all familiar with this second formation. That was the Divine Martial Immortal Execution Formation, laid by the Great Zhou Dynasty's Divine Martial Army. Although the Great Lane Temple was completely destroyed in the battle to exterminate Buddhism, the Great Zhou Dynasty's Divine Martial Army also suffered heavy losses. These years, the Great Zhou Dynasty's Emperor Liang Pan, the ruler, and the ministers had been working hard to restore the Divine Martial Army. At this moment, it seemed to be very effective. However, whether it was Zhu Yi or Shi Tianhao, their expressions were indifferent. There was no sign of difficulty on their faces. As for the Great Zhou Dynasty's ministers in Tianjing City, they did not look proud at all. Instead, their expressions were extremely solemn. In the void above Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, a formation that seemed to be even larger and more complicated than the Tianjing City's protective formation was operating silently. Boundless light spread out like an independent world. It isolated the Divine Prefecture from the world and enveloped Tianjing City, confronting the Grand Imperial Palace and Tianjing City. Streams of light outlined the formation patterns. As the formation operated, one could vaguely see the alternation of black and white. It seemed to contain heaven and earth, life and death, yin and yang, light and darkness, instant and eternity, reality and illusion, and all kinds of powerful concepts. It kept evolving like the creation of heaven and earth. In the huge formation, 12 light balls floated and floated, surrounding a large green and black cauldron. The vast world of the divine land, thousands of scenes, mountains, rivers, and geography seemed to be found on this large bronze cauldron. It was perfectly displayed without any mistakes. Although this four-legged square cauldron was suspended in the void, it gave off an extremely heavy feeling, as if the weight of the entire divine land and the vast thousand worlds was suppressing it. It was the magic treasure of creation, Ding of Shenzhou. And the huge formation that Ding of Shenzhou was suppressing the formation. I was the Mountain Gate formation of Xianmen Tianzong, the Yin and Yang Life and Death formation. Although Lin Feng was still on Yujing Mountain, he asked Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao to bring Ding of Shenzhou and the Yin and Yang Life and Death formation to West Hill City. Following them, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao's junior brother, Li Yuanfang, also returned to the vast thousand worlds from their villas and came to Tianjing City. Looking at the Yin and Yang Life and Death formation, which was not restricted by the geographical location, everyone in the Great Zhou Dynasty felt a little depressed and helpless. However, at this moment, in the northern part of the Great Zhou Dynasty, a figure slowly walked out of the domain passage that was connected to a medium-class world. This person was dressed in brocade and wore a purple gold crown on his head. His temples were slightly white, and his hands were as white as jade, spotless. As he breathed, it was as if a universe was born and destroyed in his body. There were already cultivators of the Great Zhou Dynasty waiting there. When they saw this middle-aged man, they quickly bowed and said, "Welcome back, Grand Tutor." Chapter 1272. The man that walked out of the dimension was naturally the Great Zhou Dynasty's Grand Tutor, the Marquis of Xuanji Zhuhanggu. Looking at Zhuhanggu, the Great Zhou Dynasty cultivators waiting for him outside couldn't help but feel slightly dazed. The Zhuhanggu in front of them walked in the air, neither fast nor slow, as if he was walking on flat ground. But there was no sign of any Fa aura around him, nor was there the usual vast blazing blood energy of a martial arts expert. His primordial spirit did not transform into a human form, but rather completely fused his primordial spirit with his body. Right now what was standing in the air was a body of flesh and blood. But this body of flesh and blood, right now, did not have any Li or spiritual energy supporting it. It just simply stood in the air. At first glance, it didn't seem to be anything special, but if you thought about it carefully, you would feel how terrifying it was. And this body that did not seem to emit any power from the outside, made the hearts of all the great Zhou dynasty cultivators palpitate. Following Zhu Hongwu's even and slow breathing, every time he inhaled and exhaled, it was as if a small universe was being created and destroyed in that body. The Zhu Hongwu in front of them had a dignified expression. His eyebrows were straight and his temples were slightly white, but he did not seem old at all. He looked at the great Zhou dynasty cultivators in front of him and nodded his head, then asked, "Has Xianmen Tianzong begun to act?" The great Zhou dynasty cultivator hurriedly replied, "Zhu Yi, Shi Tianhao and Li Yuanfang, disciples of the master of Xianmen, have come to Tianjing city together with the Qin dynasty's Shi Zongtang. They also have Xianmen Tianzong's creation magic treasure Ding of Shenzhou, and the yin and yang life and death formation accompanying them." When the yin and yang life and death formation was mentioned, the great Zhou dynasty cultivators all ground their teeth. In addition to Mount Yujing, the mountain gate of Xianmen heavenly sect, which could move freely and break through the void, even the mountain guarding formation, the yin and yang life and death formation, could move. How could it be called a mountain guarding formation? What kind of mountain guarding is this? A mountain attacking formation is more like it. Zhu Hongwu did not have any likes or dislikes towards the yin and yang life and death formation. But hearing that Ding of Shenzhou had also come to Tianjing city, his gaze couldn't help but become slightly serious. Ding of Shenzhou? Unfortunately, the great Zhou dynasty cultivator continued. In addition, Yu Hongyan, a disciple of the mystic gate master, has taken over Snowwind County and killed our officials and cultivators. His Royal Highness, the Dark Cloud King, and the Mahayana Grade Magical Treasure Frontier Warship are being suppressed by Xianmen Tianzong's Mahayana Grade Magical Treasure, the Sala Wonder Tree. Hearing this, Zhu Hongwu's face was not surprised. The tacit understanding between the great Zhou dynasty and Taishu Temple made it so that when they faced Xianmen Tianzong, they could not take a step back. Otherwise, not to mention what would happen to Xianmen Tianzong, they would even offend Taishu Temple. When Liangpan and the Grand Imperial Palace used the Qi of the Dragon Vein to assist the White Cloud Mountain, they seized a part of the Nine Heavens Imperial Court and filled the sky with Taishu mystic light. There was no such thing as a free lunch in the world. Offending both Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple at the same time was almost equivalent to cutting themselves off from the divine land. Unless the great Zhou dynasty completely abandoned Taishu Temple and completely submitted to Xianmen Tianzong. But the conflict between the two sides had long been difficult to reconcile, especially Zhu Hongwu and Zhu Yi, the father and son pair, who were related by blood. Zhu Hongwu crushed a voice transmission crystal, and Emperor Liangpan's voice came from the other side. "Hongwu, congratulations on finally coming out of seclusion." "Thank you for your concern, Your Majesty," Zhu Hongwu replied. Before he could continue asking, Liangpan immediately said, "Although there is progress in Yinghai, it is not ready yet. But this time, we need to prepare for the worst." Zhu Hongwu said, "Don't worry, Your Majesty. A moment of ups and downs is nothing. Looking at history, there are many people who finally soar and reach the peak. Although we are going through a calamity, the great Zhou dynasty is fated. There is no need to worry about a moment of success or failure." While this was true, it would naturally be best if they could sing triumphant songs all the way. However, the great Zhou Emperor Liangpan and Zhu Hongwu were both strong-willed people. Although the great Zhou dynasty was in danger, their hearts were still calm and steady. If one had to say that there was something that made them feel complicated and unhappy, it was not the celestial sect of wonders that was pressing down on them. Although Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao came with a fierce momentum, and Yu Hongyan even took a city in Snowgale, Liangpan and Zhu Hongwu did not feel much pressure. If the master of the Taoist Xianmen, Lin Feng, personally came to Tianjing city, then the outcome of this battle was already decided before it even started. But now, although Lin Feng let Zhu Yi and the others bring the yin-yang life and death formation and Ding of Shenzhou with them, he still stayed on Yujing Mountain, and did not even send a clone over. This greatly reduced the pressure of the Great Zhou dynasty, but at the same time, they felt complicated and difficult to understand. Even now, the Great Zhou dynasty was still an important force in the Divine Land. It could even be said that today, when the Mount Shusword sect, the Underworld Hall, and the Great Qin dynasty were all heavily injured, and the ancient world was in the ascendant, the Great Zhou dynasty was almost the strongest force in the human cultivation world. Apart from Xianmen Tianzong and Taishu Temple, Emperor Zhou Liangpan was still one of the few heavyweights in the Divine Land. But it was such a great Zhou, such a Liangpan, that could not really compete with Lin Feng at the moment. Lin Feng did not take a step out of Yujing Mountain, but Xianmen Tianzong had already made the Great Zhou dynasty feel as if they were facing a great enemy. Once upon a time, in the eyes of the Great Zhou dynasty, Xianmen Tianzong was just a rising force that needed to be paid some attention. When the Kuanping's hidden treasure opened in the Arctic Ice Sea, the Great Zhou dynasty only had the cloud-riding immortal, Li Yao, who was at the primordial spirit incarnation realm. When it came to the Battle of Yingxi, although the Great Zhou dynasty suffered a great loss and did not obtain the two immortal mountains of Penglai and Yingzhou, and even lost the Fangzhong immortal mountain that they had obtained, they could still compete with the Xianmen heavenly sect at that time. Both sides relied on their own methods and schemes. But now such an earth-shattering change, even Liang Pan and Zhu Hongwu, who had always been strong-willed, felt a little complicated at this moment. The master of the Xianmen Gate will eventually regret that he was too careless today. Zhu Hongwu's gaze was calm and focused. Slowly he said, "The battle now is like a battlefield. The enemy does not use his full strength, but we do not need to be restrained. We will first give the enemy a head-on blow and break their spirit. Your Majesty, since the two sides have finally completely broken off, then I will not hold back this time." Liang Pan said, "Just do what you want to do. But your son and Shi Tianhao came with the Yin-Yang Life and Death Formation and Ding of Shenzhou. I cannot keep them all in Tianjing City. They have the ability to split their forces to find Yu Hongwu. It is very likely that it is your son." Zhu Hongwu answered, "I will first go to Snowwind County and attack what they must save. That unfilial son will naturally have to split up with his fellow disciples. I will wait for him in Snowwind County, and then clean up the sect. But after that, I will definitely force Lin Feng out of the mountain. I will return to Tianjing City in time to help your Majesty take over Ding of Shenzhou." "It doesn't matter," Liang Pan said silently. "Just be careful and try to delay for as long as possible. When Yinghai is ready, they will inform you. That will be the time to show our thunderous methods. The war between the two worlds has just ended." Although the demon race was defeated, they are also watching the situation in the Divine Land. Taishu Temple has sealed its mountain, and the Xianmen sect master has to worry about Tianhuang vast land. This is our chance. Zhu Hongwu said respectfully, "Yes, Your Majesty." After ending the communication, Zhu Hongwu said to the cultivators of the Great Zhou dynasty beside him, "Do your job well." With that, he took a step forward and broke open the void. He had already disappeared from the spot. Outside Tianjing City, Li Yuanfang sat silently in the Yin-Yang Life and Death Formation. Slowly, the giant formation was operating. Although it erupted with a powerful force, it was like Mount Tai pressing down on them. No one in Tianjing City dared to take it lightly. Outside the formation, Zhu Yi and Shi Tianhao, as well as Shi Zongtang and the cultivators of the Great Qin dynasty stood together. Silently, they looked at Tianjing City in the distance. Zhu Yi had his hands behind his back. His expression was calm and indifferent. He looked in the direction of Tianjing City, but if one looked closely, one would realize that his eyes did not seem to be focused. In his eyes, one could vaguely see the word "E" appear. There were also rays of light flowing continuously. A mysterious power concept emerged from it, as if there were countless things being calculated. Suddenly, Zhu Yi's eyes moved slightly. Then he cut the tip of one of his fingers. Specks of light flowed out as if it was bleeding. The light was wrapped by Zhu Yi's dermic powers. As it vibrated, it gradually turned into dark red real blood. These blood traces burned in the void, and then turned into streams of light that shot into the distance. The word in Zhu Yi's eyes flashed. His gaze seemed to solidify and chase after the stream of light, passing through endless time and space. My father came out of seclusion, but he went to find trouble with fourth junior sister. However, he most likely wants to surround us and attack our reinforcements. At the same time, he wants to force us to split up. His target is still me. Seeing Shi Tianhao and Shi Zongtang look over, Zhu Yi said silently, "Little junior brother, I'll leave this place to you and sixth junior brother." Shi Tianhao smiled. "I wish second senior brother success." As he said that, a shadow flashed above his head. Although it was a little dilapidated, it seemed to be bigger and more majestic than Tianjing City. Li Yuanfang, who was in the Yin-Yang Life and Death Formation, changed his hand seals. The power of the Yin-Yang Life and Death Formation immediately spread out and pressed down on Tianjing City. The Grand Imperial Palace in the sky above Tianjing City emitted an astonishing brilliance and aura of power. Tianjing City's protective formation attracted the qi of the dragon veins of the whole country, and its power increased further. Liang Pan activated the Grand Imperial Palace and occupied the home ground of Tianjing City. Although its power was astonishing, if Zhu Yi wanted to leave, he would not be able to stop Shi Tianhao and Li Yuanfang from the side. Zhu Yi's finger lightly touched the space between his eyebrows, and the Two Realms Void technique was activated. His body disappeared from the spot, and was replaced by his Haoyang clone. In the blink of an eye, Zhu Yi's original body had already arrived beside Yu Hongyan. Silently, he raised his head and looked at the void in the sky. Almost the moment after Zhu Yi arrived, a crack appeared in the void between the Great Zhou dynasty's Snow Wind County. An ordinary-looking but demon-like middle-aged man stepped out from it. It was Zhu Hongwu. The father and son's gazes met at the first moment. Their seemingly tangible gazes stirred up the surrounding space, and seemed to distort slightly. Zhu Yi looked at Zhu Hongwu calmly. "Father, you've finally come out of seclusion." You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.